Good evening, everyone. We will call the Auburn Study Session meeting on Monday, August 26, 2024 to order. Tonight's study session meeting will be held both in person and virtually. Sean, will you please call roll?
Deputy Mayor Laird Brown.
Absent. Excuse.
Councilmember Ammer.
Here.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Here.
Councilmember Rakes.
Here.
Councilmember Clinton Taylor.
Here.
Councilmember Tracy Taylor.
Here.
Councilmember Trot Manuel.
Here. Sean, do we have any agenda modifications this evening?
No, Chair, we do not.
Okay. Tonight we have one report, Councilmember Amir. Oh, are we doing that first thing? The READY program. Amir, can you please provide the READY report out?
Oh, I'm sorry. That was Councilmember Baldwin.
Okay.
Yes.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Sure. Our update is that the READY Coalition has voted and approved the READY Work Plan, Phase 1's final draft, and the coalition is currently working through that final draft with city leadership, and then we'll reconvene again prior to approving the final plan adoption.
Okay. Thank you. Now I will be turning it over to Public Works and Community Development discussion items. Councilwoman Taylor.
Thank you. All right, first on the agenda this evening is the 2024 Comprehensive Sewer Plan and Overview Update. I'd like to welcome Bob Elwell.
Yes.
Bob, thank you for being here.
Thanks. Good evening, council members, mayor. I'm Bob Elwell, the sewer utility engineer for the city. Thank you for allowing me to present an overview of Auburn's sewer collection system and a review of Auburn's, the update to the comprehensive sewer plan. This review by the city council is an important step in the process of developing that plan. The presentation is going to move fairly quickly through a variety of different topics, so feel free to stop me and ask questions at any point. So, as you're aware, the city comprehensive plan includes the 10 elements listed on the slide, one of which is called the utilities element. So the utilities element includes franchise utilities such as gas, electric, telecommunications, as well as the city-owned utilities, the water, storm drainage, and sanitary sewer. The utilities element itself will include a statement that incorporates this comprehensive sewer plan as part of the overall city plan, so they're all tied together. It's not always the case that the update to the city comprehensive plan and the comprehensive sewer plan or the other utility plans occur in the same year, but especially now with the increased demands to accommodate growing population and additional housing, and it has been advantageous for the city to incorporate the plan projection increases in our anticipated need for sewer capacity, and also vice versa for the planning department to consider the utility capacity and planning where to concentrate those population and employment increases. So that's a process that we've been through for a year plus. So, this next slide shows some important milestones in the process of developing the plan. So back in May of 2023, we discussed the sewer utilities goals and policies with the city council. So since those form the basis of how we developed our plan and how we'll operate the utility. So following that review, then we and our consultant worked at updating our existing system information and calibrating our hydraulic model. And we also collaborated with the planning department and others, as we just spoke about, to develop goals and projections for future population and employment growth within the city. Once we arrived at those goals last fall, we then used those projections to project future wastewater flows, identify potential future capacity issues within our system, and develop plans and programs for addressing them. We then presented our draft plan to the Planning Commission for their review and a public hearing in May and June of this year. and subsequently submitted the draft plan to the Department of Ecology and to the King County Utilities Technical Review Committees for review and for comment. We received the review comments in August, made some minor updates to the plans to address those comments, and provided the plan to the Planning Commission last week and to you tonight. Following this meeting, we intend to consider any of your comments, edit the plan if necessary, and then resubmit it to those reviewing agencies for tentative approval prior to adoption by the City Council in December. So before we get started specifically with the plan itself, I think it'll be helpful to give a quick overview of Auburn's sanitary sewer system. So the sewer utility is what's called a component agency of the King County Wastewater Treatment Division, which means we operate a collection system where we collect wastewater from homes and from businesses within the city. We transmit them through pump stations and sewer mains to King County's larger conveyance system. And then from that point, King County conveys it to the South Treatment Plant up in Renton for treatment, and then eventually for discharge up into the Puget Sound. So this map shows the city of Auburn in green, and then the dark lines basically represent various trunk lines that are owned by and operated by the county that transmit or convey the sewage north to the treatment plant. So this next slide focuses in on Auburn and shows our service area, and that's the area from which we collect the wastewater. So it generally follows the city limits, although there are a few places in the northeast portion of town up on Lee Hill. There's some areas served by the city of Kent and areas served by Seuss Creek Water and Sewer District. And then on the West Hill, there's some areas that are served by Lake Haven Water and Sewer District. So those essentially those boundaries were set out before the larger annexations that occurred in 2007, and they reflect the terrain in the area, so that most of those areas that are not in our system slope towards the other systems, and that way we avoid excess pumping and using excess energy in that case. So they're kind of natural boundaries almost. So we also provide service to several areas that are officially not within the city, even though there are some that are surrounded by the city. There's a few pockets of King County, and then an area of Pierce County, which we don't currently serve, but it is an area that's within our service area, and we would serve if we ever have extensions to that area. So, and then we also serve a few areas within Bonnie Lake service area and Pacific service area through some interlocal agreements. And so physically, our system consists of approximately over 200 or 205 miles of gravity mains, 12,700 sewer service connections, which mostly are 6-inch pipes that go from the sewer mains out to individual buildings, 17 pump stations, and approximately 5 miles of force mains associated with those pump stations. So that's the big picture of the system, and then the plan kind of lays out how we manage that system overall. So it begins with chapter 1, of course. Introduction, background, explains the needs and purpose of the plan, the objectives of the plan, each of which is addressed in the subsequent chapters, and background information related to the utility, such as its service area, its relationship with the King County Wastewater Treatment Division, its relationship with land use planning, and relationship with neighboring sewer utilities. There are a couple of regulatory requirements that guide these plan updates. The state law, the one listed on the slide, gives the Department of Ecology the primary responsibility to approve sewer systems and all changes and improvements made to them. Agencies such as Auburn are allowed to manage the improvements within their own system if they're consistent with an approved sewer plan. So essentially getting the sewer plan approved by Department of Ecology gives us the authority to manage the system within the city. And King County Code also requires that any sewer utility that operates in any part of unincorporated King County, and we have several small areas, as you saw on the slide, like that, They must have a comprehensive sewer plan approved by the King County Council. So that's, so the second, chapter 2 describes the system policies. And these are the same policies that we discussed in detail with the council back in May of 2023. I know not everybody was here at that time, but some of you were. But to summarize, the policies are grouped together under goal statements. And those goal statements are broad and indicate a general aim or purpose to be achieved. And then the policies themselves are more specific, related to individual topics, and indicate a clear commitment by the city as to this is what we want to do and how we want to operate. So, they fall under the categories that you see on there: service area, system planning, operations and maintenance, environmental stewardship, system performance and reliability, and fiscal responsibility. So, and as I mentioned, these policies, they're the same ones that we presented a year and a half ago, with a couple of exceptions. The proposed changes were made in response to agency comments, and are just really not changing the policies themselves, but just adding some clarifications. So, for example, this first one, the Department of Ecology, in one of their review comments, was concerned that we didn't have anything in place in order to evaluate and approve the use of individual grinder pumps for homes. And so we added some clarifying language saying, because it is something that's required by code and it's something that we actually do. So we added some language just to say that we will evaluate the applications consistent with our code. So I didn't really change that, but just since this is the primary responsibility of the council is the policies, I want to make that clear. And likewise, policy 3.7, we talk about private sewer systems. They're concerned that we would possibly be authorizing private sewage treatment plants, which was not what our intention was. It was really just some conveyance systems within the individual parcels, and so we added some language just to clarify that and show that it was consistent with Washington Administrative Code as well. So chapter 3, we discussed the basis for the planning and conducting the hydraulic modeling of the existing and the future conditions based on projected future development and how those projections relate to land use designations and zoning. So it also discusses some of the elements associated with the hydraulic modeling, which is really kind of the basis for how, if we know our sewer is designed correctly. And we discussed some of it more thoroughly in chapter 5. But it describes in this case that while wastewater in the sewers, it consists primarily of drainage from the plumbing in our homes and our businesses, we also need to consider what we call inflow and infiltration, which is, in brief, it's stormwater or groundwater that gets into the system and add to the flows. And basically, again, we'll discuss that a little bit more in some of the future chapters. Chapter 4, it contains a more detailed description of our system as it exists now. It includes a discussion of the 5 sewer basins in our city, which are shown on the right and include the valley area, Lee Hill, the plateau area along Auburn Way South, West Hill, and the South Hill area, which is basically everything south of the White River. It also contains descriptions of our pump stations, river crossings. We have two river crossings that we'll discuss a little bit more later. And a summary of the characteristics of our sewer mains, such as the size, pipe material, and the date of installation. So, one thing I want to point out is that our data on for sewer mains is currently incomplete, especially related to installation date and in some cases material. And sewer staff, we're currently working with our Public Works GIS group to systematically go through the entire system and get those items updated. This chapter also describes a little more of how our system interfaces with King County's conveyance system and how we work with the county to identify businesses that discharge what we call industrial waste. It just has different characteristics to it, so that the appropriate pretreatment can be enforced or in order to protect the downstream primarily, it's for the downstream treatment system. It could affect the conveyance system, but usually it's more of a problem for the treatment. Chapter 5 is about evaluating our system, both in its existing condition and in the future condition that includes the anticipated population and employment growth included in the city's overall comprehensive planning. So we used our hydraulic model to determine where that growth may be straining our system and where capacity improvements may need to be considered. So the hydraulic model essentially takes the characteristics of the system, such as the pipe sizes and the pipe slope, and determines the capacity, and then compares that with the expected flow based upon what we've either measured and what we expect based on how many additional connections are going to be made to it. But it also includes a factor for the inflow and infiltration, which I mentioned briefly earlier. So that's the either stormwater or groundwater that gets into the system and can affect the capacity, or it doesn't affect the capacity, it just affects how much capacity you need. And that's directly related to a storm. So how much, if it's raining quite a bit, we end up getting more flow in the sewer system. And that's true of any sewer system. In some areas, it's more significant than others. So the reason I'm going into that is that the third bullet down, we did a future system evaluation including climate change. Well, the big effect of climate change on the sewer system is going to be an increased duration or intensity of rainfall, and how that's going to affect what capacity we have. So what we did was, when we originally analyzed a certain amount of rainfall that's going to cause I&I, our consultant used some factors from the University of Washington Climate Impacts Group and applied them to what we call our design storm. And that allowed us to analyze, well, what additional capacity are we going to need? And it showed a few more pipes that we'll have to definitely take a look at and anticipate, probably just do some continued monitoring on those and possibly replace them as well if they're in danger of being over capacity. So while overall the modeling does indicate we have some additional areas where we need to increase capacity, we have a relatively minor number of sewer mains within the city that have capacity problems, or that we anticipate having capacity problems. So as I said, we do have projected capacity needs, and we're planning to address those through either a specific capital project or as part of our repair and replacement program. Overall, however, since we have a fairly few number of those capacity issues, the major focus of our work during this planning period is going to be on evaluations and assessments that help us make good asset management decisions for our existing facilities. And in order to make decisions about how to spend capital funds, when to replace them, and how to go about that. As such, there are recommendations in this chapter to address inflow and infiltration issues, continue the asset inventory that I mentioned earlier, and to include projects to evaluate specific components of the system, such as pump stations, side sewers, siphons, and large diameter mains. And so we're going to look at some of these recommendations in detail in the next few slides. I mentioned this a number of times here. Inflow and infiltration is basically non-wastewater that's entering the system. And so we can identify them through a few methods. Ideally, or most obviously, is when we can observe it either during an inspection or basically during an inspection. And but another way to do that, in a little more systematic way, is to put flow meters in at different locations and measure the flow and how that correlates with rainfall, and make some conclusions that way. So, and ideally, we'd be reducing these places where we have a lot of I&I or infiltration. And the way that we do that is we either do rehabilitation or replacement of pipes. And probably a more important thing, and I think it's something that we have in place now, but in looking long-term, it's really to have good, solid construction standards so that we prevent future I&I from happening. Most of the infiltration is occurring in old pipes where the joints were not watertight and they've been in the ground a long time as well. And so that's where most of that's occurring. So as those things get replaced with good construction standards, we'll be periodically eliminating or little by little eliminating that issue. So I mentioned the system inventory. This is something that is really important for our asset management, and we're primarily focused on our mains, manholes, and laterals. And while we have a pretty good sense of where things are, what manholes are connected to what pipes, and schematically it's laid out fairly well. There are some holes in that inventory, and some of the locations of the manholes are not in our mapping system are not as precise as they could be. Some of the material and the age of the material are missing. Some of the elevations are based on a different datum, which basically means they have to be converted in order to compare to other parts of the system. And so the Public Works GIS group is going through and doing that systematic inventory right now using as-built drawings and inspection records and other items. So what you see on the slide here on the top right, I know there's a lot of detail on there. I was just trying to give an example. That would be an as-built drawing, which shows this is when this development got constructed. They took the plans and they put markups on the plans to show what actually got put in the ground. Well, our group is taking that and making sure that when we translate it into our mapping system, that all those things are accurate. And so, and that's what's shown on the bottom. And then the system component evaluations. This is something I think it's pretty important. We have some key portions of our system that we really want to pay attention to. So the first item up there is actually not a specific project, but it's part of our M&O, or maintenance and operations program for inspecting pipes. So CCTV it's closed circuit TV, and essentially it is a small camera mounted on a small tractor that gets sent through a sewer main and takes a video of that main and does inspection in that way. So it can go about 800 feet or so and sends a video to the computer in the CCTV van. And as part of the last comprehensive sewer plan, we adopted a standard condition scoring system that's helping us to compare the conditions of different pipes throughout the city and help us prioritize our repair and replacement program. The next item up there, the siphon evaluation. So we have two locations where our sewer lines cross the Green River, and those are shown on the map there. One spot near the south end of the golf course is Isaac Evans Park, and it consists of two parallel pipes that go underneath the bottom of the river and then come up at the southeast corner of Brandon Park. So that's where it crosses there, and it uses the pressure from upstream in the pipe in order to push basically push all the sewage through. The other spot is a pipe that's embedded in the 8th Street Bridge, and it comes down Lee Hill Road, rises with the bridge, and then slopes downhill past the crown of the bridge. And so, because of the shape of these things, where there's a dip in the pipe, it's very hard to inspect them. And because there's only two lines coming off of Lee Hill, it's something that we definitely want to keep. We definitely want to do a good evaluation of. And so we have a plan to do basically we call a siphon. It's not really a siphon. They call it an inverted siphon to use bypass pumping and high pressure jets and a special CCTV camera to do a visual inspection of those lines. The next bullet down, side sewer evaluations is so that's another component of our system we plan on paying specific attention to. Those are the pipes that serve individual buildings and homes and connect directly to sewer mains and manholes. Our CCTV program is not currently equipped in order to do those inspections. Those inspections also take quite a bit of time to do. So there's a large volume of them. So we intended to hire a vendor to use what we call a side launch camera, okay, that can basically go up the pipe and then turn and go up the side sewer. And then systematically inspect the side sewer. We'll start with the oldest pipes in the areas with high I&I as well. Those generally kind of correlate, primarily clay and concrete ones, and we hope to identify pipes with defects that are likely to fail or that allow significant infiltration. We're just to clarify, the city is responsible for those pipes that are within the right of way, so we won't be doing an inspection far into the individual properties. Large diameter pipe inspections. We did this project once in about 2020, and that was our initial effort on that. But some of our pipes are large, and using larger equipment that's better equipped to inspect those pipes is a little more efficient. We're proposing to do that again in, I think it was 2028, if my timing is correct on that. And so we'd be able to compare the two inspections to see if there's any deterioration in the pipes in that time. So, and then finally, a pump station assessment. Although we inspect our pump stations regularly, but in this case, to get a broader picture, we'd have a consultant perform inspections of both the physical portions of the pump stations and of the historical pumping data to see if there's any identifiable maintenance or capacity needs, and to help prioritize repair or replacement. We have some pump stations that are fairly old, and we would look to see if they need either upgrades or replacement. So Chapter 6 describes how our maintenance and operations group is organized and the responsibilities they have in operating and maintaining the sewer system. This chapter also discusses the fats, oils, and grease reduction program, or FOG for short. So our FOG program monitors and inspects over 170 food service establishments, making sure they maintain the grease traps and grease interceptors, and otherwise act to minimize fog that enters the public sewer system. And it's a beautiful picture there, but you may have heard stories of different places where fats accumulated and caused problems. So this chapter also details a program for maintaining the sewer system, such as how often we inspect and conduct maintenance on our assets. You see the picture there. The top picture is a combination of a jet truck and a Vactor truck. So it's got a large vacuum and also a hose that can basically clean out sewer lines. On the right of that picture is a high pressure jet nozzle, and that's what's used to basically do the cleaning of those lines. On the lower left, we talked about our CCTV program. That's a picture of the operator looking at a screen that's showing what the camera is seeing as it goes down a pipe. The middle picture is the camera being lowered into a manhole, and the last picture is I like it because it's a fairly obvious picture. It's a pipe that's been repaired, so it's not currently like that, but it's a clay pipe that has had some damage to it, and that we discovered it through the CCTV program. So Chapter 7 identifies capital improvement needs during that 6-year and 20-year planning period. The identified projects include high-level costs, and it also addresses the system evaluations discussed when we discussed the recommendations from Chapter 5. The pictures here show a replacement of a sewer main and the installation of a pump station. So summary of I don't understand there's a lot of information on here, but basically this is a summary of the capital improvement program that's shown on the chart. It shows the proposed cost for projects beginning in 2025 through 2030, and then a summary of the anticipated cost to meet our needs through 2044. And of course, the farther you go into the future, the less certain these costs and the needs become. The color coding is not included in the plan, but I thought it was illustrative and indicated some of the nature of some of these projects. The ones that are in green are specifically or primarily repair and replacement projects. They're old assets. We're not necessarily increasing capacity on them, but they're things that need to be replaced. The ones that are in red are for capacity improvements, and some of them can serve more than one purpose, but it allows us to serve more people if we need it. And then the ones in blue are those system evaluations that we discussed. And then finally, the finance chapter includes the funding plan for the identified capital improvements and the cost of the city to maintain its service. It specifically reviewed the previous 6 years. It made projections for the next 9 to 10 years and evaluates the status of the sewer fund, meeting specific requirements for reserve funds and other items over that period of time. While it does not establish rates, it does project what rates would need to be to fund the plan, and it conducts an affordability analysis to help determine the effect on the ratepayer. So the next steps in the development of the plan are to consider and incorporate any comments that you have tonight for the plan, resubmit it to the Department of Ecology in King County for tentative approval, and then following the adoption by the council in December, we submit the copies to the reviewing agency for final approval. So, are there any questions?
Council, any questions? Councilmember Baldwin?
Can you go back to the slide of it showed all the.
Okay, for Councilmember Rakes, that's fine. I called Count Kate. That's
Oh,
fine.
sorry.
That's fine.
That one. Could you tell me on number 1 why it changes so much between 25, then it gets bigger in 26, then down in 27, then up in 28?
Yes, so just for that works well with our capital group to have for instance, 2025 would be a year where we would primarily be doing planning and design for the next year, and the next year we'd be in construction.
Okay.
And the following year we'd be in design, and so we'd go in a rhythm that way.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Baldwin?
Yeah, I've got a handful, but I do have one for this slide, so let's start there. With the projections or sort of the aggregations we've got in the far right columns, we've got the 25 to 30 and then the 31 to 44. It's kind of weird seeing it's like a 6-year and then is that a 14-year range on that second one?
Yes, and it was really just to project out to 20 years.
Okay.
That was when our population projections went out to about 20 years, and so we kind of matched that. And that's a fairly standard planning horizon for that.
Do those costs include increases we're expecting from inflation or not?
These do not.
Today's dollars?
These are specifically in 2024 dollars, I believe, is what we designated. In the financial chapter, they looked at those costs and inflated them at made an assumption of inflation in that case.
Okay.
Councilmember Baldwin?
Back to the policy changes. I think it was policy 3.7. In that one where it was going to speak about being able to have, I think it was the private sewer,
Yes.
providing it's consistent with the Washington Administrative Code. By allowing for that even within that Washington Administrative Code, does that change anything with regards to the city's responsibilities or span of control?
It means essentially that it's a fairly limited case. But for instance, if a large like the Safeway Distribution Center has a system within their buildings, it's their responsibility to take care of that.
Okay.
And then when it gets to the right of way, it becomes ours.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that would do anything from like development fees or services that there would be a chargeback for.
No. there's no difference. It's essentially a very large side sewer.
Any other questions, Council?
Yes.
Of course. All right, Councilmember Baldwin.
Yeah, for the sewer mapping and GIS effort, will that be covering only the areas covered by our utilities, or will that include any of those branches like Lake Haven or some of the other districts that we saw on that first page?
It's just for our utilities.
Okay. And when do we expect that to be completed?
We're a little bit unsure at this point, but within probably 2 to 3 years. That's pretty rough though, estimate.
Okay.
Kind of at the beginning of that process.
Go ahead.
Okay. With the side sewer evaluations that are happening, you said that essentially goes down the side sewer, and we'll be using a vendor for that within the city's right of way. If the vendor sees anything that would indicate either a residential property owner or, larger building owner was having issues with their sewer, is there a mechanism to notify those individuals, or what do we do with the findings if it's not on the up and up?
We don't really have that programmed in, but we would definitely let them know through in some manner, whether it's a phone call or a letter.
Okay, so they would be notified. Okay, and then last question. When we look at the sewer comprehensive plan, we've got, of course, the things that are happening within the pipeline of our infrastructure for the city. Do we have anything addressing other types of wastewater or sewage getting into waterways outside of that system within this plan? Thinking about like our waterways for the Green River, White River, and some of the challenges that sometimes happen when we have homeless encampments alongside rivers.
As far as
Yeah.
we don't have anything specifically within our sewer plan that addresses any of that.
Okay, so it's more specific to the infrastructure.
Yes. There's probably more layers than that. I know that the King County Health Department are basically the ones that deal with our on-site septic systems and other kind of health issues, but I'm sure there's a lot of other code issues involved in.
If I can add just one thing on that as well. So keep in mind that our sewer system is paid by our ratepayers for the service that they get. So it doesn't necessarily cover other types of things and wouldn't be appropriate to use their rates to pay for those other types of things, like the septic systems and other things that Bob was mentioning.
Council, any more questions? Councilmember Emmer?
So I don't have a specific question because I read all the presentation. I was so happy to see the policy 5.1, the education, that the fog, that we already hire another engineer. I start reading about the pipe and the aging, then I find it's already in the plan to how the color code works. So just want to say I love the whole package.
Okay, thank you.
Just reading it, and when I start writing question, then I go more, I find the answer. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's good to
And I
hear.
cannot wait to learn from the engineer about the toilet paper and the get educate too. So I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Fantastic. Thank you, Bob. Thank you for your
Thank you.
presentation. Appreciate it. Next up is our comprehensive transportation plan. Director Gao?
Yes, so we'll have Jacob Sweeting, our Assistant Director and City Engineer, come up to speak to our Transportation Comprehensive Plan and give you an overview of that one.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Once again, Jacob Sweeting, Assistant Director of Public Works and City Engineer. Going to be here presenting to you tonight the full final draft 2024 Comprehensive Transportation Plan. So you just heard from Bob Elwell talking about the sewer plan, which is actually part of the utilities element. So the transportation plan is actually part of the transportation element, which is one of many pieces of the comprehensive plan. So there's several different elements, and tonight you're hearing about two plans associated with two of those elements. So the comprehensive plan itself is the shell that holds all these different elements. Within that is the transportation element, and the transportation element is really a high-level summary of what the comprehensive transportation system plan is, and we are going to be walking through the full comprehensive transportation system plan tonight. So this is just a kind of looking back in time and looking to the future of the schedule overview. So we started back in April 2023 with an overview of the comprehensive plan. Then throughout 2023, we've been to the City Council several times talking about different pieces of this comprehensive transportation plan. Most of those were policy related. Then again, we came in spring of 2024 this year and gave another overview. And then tonight we're talking about the final draft. Throughout this process, we've also been in front of the Planning Commission, just like the sewer plan and our other plans, talking with them. And this summer we did get a recommendation from the Planning Commission to move forward with the draft as we have it now. And then the transportation plan will be included with the full comprehensive plan brought in either late November or December for adoption by the council. So why are we doing this update? Well, first and foremost, it is a mandatory, it's a regulatory requirement. We're required by the Growth Management Act to update the plan. We're also required by the Puget Sound Regional Council, PSRC, to update the plan. It also helps us to comply with the Americans with Disability Act, Title VI compliance. Title VI compliance is the federal requirement that any programs that see federal funding do so. They administer the programs in a way that's non-discriminatory. And then also we have House Bill 1181, which was passed by the legislature last year that requires this plan to be updated as well. We have to update the plan and keep it in compliance with these regulations to be eligible for several grant programs. We also, from a more pragmatic standpoint, we update the plan to identify existing conditions. We take an inventory of our existing facilities, and then we identify needs or different issues with our existing systems that we'd like to address. We also look at the future land use and how the land use drives the need to improve and expand our transportation systems. We look at updating our resources and we look at our financial plan. And then we also, with this update, we had a lot of focus on trying to make the plan more usable, more accessible to the general public. So we did a lot of interactive maps, a lot of online engagement, a lot of online information, and really tried to present the information in a way that was useful not only for engineers and planners, but also just for people that want to know more about the transportation systems in Auburn. So the final draft plan includes 7 different chapters and then an appendices. That appendices is where the maps reside, and those maps this time also include some links to interactive maps, which I will point out here as we go through it. But I'm just going to start walking through the different chapters, starting with Chapter 1. Chapter 1 includes a summary of our public outreach. We were heavily focused on public outreach. We ended up getting over 180 comments through various different channels of our outreach, which is really good. A lot of those, about 100 of those comments were project specific. So later on, I'll talk about how we generated the projects that are included in the comp plan. So we have 100 comments that are going to help us develop those projects further as we implement them. We got over 20 emailed and phone calls comments. We also brought in comments that we received through SeeClickFix. So it's used for pothole repairs, but also in this case, we heard comments that helped us to formulate this comprehensive plan. And then we also got about 40 comments that we received through in-person events. We went to the farmers market. We made a presentation to the senior center and heard several comments from them. We had an open house event. We went to a Kiwanis event. And then we had 2 events where we actually went out on the Inner Trail and we had a celebration station. These are the pictures you see here on top. where we tried to get comments from bikers in our community about our bike network system and where they thought we had strengths and opportunities for improvements. So also in chapter 1, we talk about regulatory requirements and compliance. We actually, in that section, we refer to an appendix section where we have all the different checklists from the regulatory agencies that we made sure were filled out. We since have submitted the plan to the Department of Commerce and PSRC and received very minor comments. Most of the comments were that thank you for following our checklist and doing what they recommend we do as far as the main elements of this. The chapter also talks about agency coordination and how we as a city, it's very important that we coordinate with several different agencies to have a successful transportation system. Those include the Muckshoot Indian Tribe, includes the Washington State Department of Transportation, it includes the Puget Sound Regional Council that I mentioned before, and it also involves engaging with our neighbors, so our neighboring cities like the City of Kent, City of Sumner, City of Renton, Puyallup, and several more. And then finally, chapter 1 talks about the relationship between land use and transportation planning. So the development of the preferred land use alternative that's in the land use element of the comprehensive plan relied heavily on the transportation modeling that was done in this plan to test different land use scenarios, to test how placement of the different growth throughout the city would impact the transportation systems. And for the most part, where that landed was the growth that is required per our county-wide targets. We found it most reasonable to plan that growth in areas where we have access to transit, where we have planned high-frequent transit systems, and that ended up being where that preferred land use element is, and also helped formulate this plan as well. So chapter 2 talks about the city's transportation system as a multimodal network. So multimodal network or multimodal systems means that it is a system that relies on many different modes of transportation. So not just vehicles, but walking, biking, transit. It also looks at freight movement as well as the airport movement. The chapter includes inventories of all those systems except for the airport. The airport actually has a separate plan. So really this plan just references the airport master plan. But it takes the chapter has an inventory. It also establishes level service standards, which we'll talk more about here in a minute. We then take the inventory and the level service standards to evaluate the existing conditions. We evaluate the future 2044 conditions, and then develop projects, programs, and other actions to address any gaps in level of service for both the existing and the future conditions. So focusing more on the multimodal level service standards, because this really, not just for the city of Auburn, but most other agencies around the region, this was a new requirement that all comprehensive transportation plans had to be multimodal. Had to incorporate multimodal network standards, had to incorporate level service standards. So the multimodal level service standards, I already described what the multimodal part of that is. The level service standards are really just metrics that are used to describe how well a transportation system is either moving people or goods. Historically, those metrics have focused on vehicles and how well vehicles are moving through the system. With multimodal level service standards, that gets expanded to those other modes that I was talking about. I will focus a little bit more on that here in a couple slides. So the multimodal level service standards, it's really, besides it being a requirement, it also allows us to plan our transportation system in a way that is more sustainable, is more focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and also helps us focus more on an equitable transportation system. It also helps us develop standards to develop and prioritize the system. And it also gives us another mechanism to help development activity mitigate their impacts or mitigate their capacity needs on the system, not just by building new roads or widening roads, but also by doing some other types of things like expanding biking systems or expanding sidewalks. So more on the implications of having multimodal level service standards. What you'll see now is that we have city programs and projects that are specifically meant or intended to address level surface gaps or deficiencies in the existing or future system for active transportation, when before those capacity projects were solely focused on vehicle capacity. Now they're focused on sidewalks and biking, as well as providing access to transit. You also see when development activity is building out an undeveloped frontage property, you'll see more focus on not just the roadway improvements, but also the sidewalk and the bike facility improvements. The traffic impact fees. Traffic impact fees is a fee that developers pay based on the amount of vehicular traffic that they generate, and so it varies depending on the type of development activity it is. Historically, our program has focused simply on vehicle trips generated by the development. This is going to focus on people trips, so trips that are on all modes of travel, not just on vehicles. And so when we collect that fee, we will also use that fee to help build out those different modes, not just the vehicle, the streets and the roadways, but also the bike lanes and the sidewalks. And then also you'll see with development activity, the traffic mitigation. So a developer typically for a larger development has to do a study, and if there's identified impacts, they have to propose a mitigation to those impacts. That's how they maintain concurrency through the Growth Management Act. Now with the multimodal level service standards, those mitigation, they might need to do mitigation for those non-motorized systems, but two, they can also, like I said before, make improvements to the other modes to try to encourage a mode shift to try to address potential capacity issues from a vehicular standpoint. So I'm going to walk through really briefly the different level service standards for the different modes that we have. Vehicle level service standards have been around for a while. Here in Auburn, we focus on vehicle level service at intersections. So to measure the level of service at an intersection, we measure the intersection delay, and then based on the amount of average delay for a vehicle sitting at an intersection, we assign a letter grade. Generally, letter grades A through C. Intersections are working quite effectively. The delays are not very significant. Then we move to level service D. Level service D is what you typically see during the peak commute times, when you feel like you're waiting at a stop sign or you're waiting at a traffic signal for an extended period of time. Level service E is when things start to break down. You start to see longer queues. You start to wait through multiple cycles of a red light. So you're back and you see it processing through several times. And then level service F is where it's come to the intersection is really you have very high delays and you have a lot of operational issues. So our standard across the board for minimum level service standards for intersections is D. And then we do allow during those PM peak commute times for intersections of two principal arterials, which we have, I believe, 8 in the city. We allow those to go down to an E. So that would be, say, Auburn Way South and M Street Southeast. And part of the reason to allow it to go down to an E is that really to build that up to a D, you would have such a massive improvement to cover that 15-minute peak commute time where it wouldn't seem to be the most efficient use of funding, as well as it would be taking significant amounts of property. And so while most of the time there's enough capacity of the roadway, building it out to that short period of time may not make sense. So just to give you just a comparison, so a level service D is typically 35 to 55 seconds of delay. 55 seconds would be a traffic signal, where a 35-second delay would be at a stop sign. And then E is all the way up to an 80 seconds. So still less than 2 minutes that you're waiting during that level service E situation at an intersection. So this slide shows some of the existing conditions as compared to the conditions realized by the 2044 preferred land use alternative at a full build-out stage. Roughly a 32% increase in households about a 44% increase in jobs. Well, all those new households and all those new jobs creates more traffic, more people trips, we hope. Hopefully we can convert some of those vehicle trips to people trips. That's the intention of the plan. But from a purely vehicle standpoint, the AM peak commutes increases by about 30% of trips and the PM commute by about 37%. So we take those numbers and we do an analysis at the intersections throughout the city. And we analyzed, in the existing conditions, 157 different intersections. In the future conditions, we added another 5 intersections that aren't there today, but will be there in the future into the analysis. And from that analysis, we found that under today's conditions, there are 13 intersections that are not operating at the minimum level service standards, or they're operating below the target. And then another 8 intersections were added to that list under the future conditions. So a total of 21 intersections in the future, between the existing and the future, shown to not be meeting those level service standards. So from that, we start looking at what are the solutions. How can we address those level service issues? And we developed a list. Here we see 28 projects, which that's because there's about 7 projects on this list that were already in the pipeline, already in the plan to address existing level service issues that were already in the model. So you add on to that another 21 intersections, and that's where this list of projects comes from. So it's a list of 21 different capital projects that has a price tag of about $123 million. These are some of the projects that would be going into the traffic impact fee fund impact program and funded by those traffic impact fees. This map, so I just wanted to point out real quick. So the conceptual projects and map is circled on this slide. That is actually something that is in the appendices of the plan, and you can actually click that and it goes to an interactive map where you can click on each one of those tags and look to see what the conceptual idea is behind those projects and what the price tag is. And as a side note, so this map, that Appendix A and that clickable link is on page 290. That's PDF page 290, by the way. It's not the page number. They're off by 1 halfway through the packet. But if you type 290 on the PDF that you're looking at for the agenda, that would take you to where you can click on that conceptual projects map and look at some of these projects. Okay, so next, looking at the multimodal service standards, we're going to talk about active transportation. Active transportation are those bike and pedestrian facilities. These 2 maps are included in that Appendix A of the plan. Those would be pages PDF pages 293 and 294 in the agenda that you're looking at. So these maps were the inventory that we did for bike facilities. On the left are the bike facilities throughout the city, which consist of a few different types of bike facilities. You have Class 1 bikeways, which are bike lanes, which are separated trails. Class 2 bikeways, which are the bike lanes that are in the street. And then Class 3 bikeways, which really are any city street throughout the city, because all city streets are considered shared use unless posted otherwise. And this identifies which ones of those are actually marked with what we call sharrows. So those are the markers that show share the roadway with the bicyclists. And on the right is a sidewalk map showing where we have existing sidewalks and where those sidewalks meet our minimum required width per the current design standards of 5 feet and where they don't. So in totality, basically, we have about just shy of 300 miles of sidewalks throughout the city. We have 21 miles of bike lanes, 23 miles of separated trails that are on our bike route networks, and then which equates to about 44 miles of non-shared bike facilities. So those are actually bike facilities that aren't those shared road bike facilities I was talking about, where those sharrows are. So the actual standards that were developed for the active transportation facilities are based on a concept called level of traffic stress, or LTS. The LTS ranges from 1 to 4. So an LTS of 1 is an active transportation facility that is comfortable for almost all users to enjoy. This would be something like a separated trail that's away from the roadway, so you feel very comfortable riding on biking on that, regardless of your age or your experience level on biking. And then ranges all the way down to LTS 4. LTS 4 would be a facility, sometimes it's those shared roadway facilities in certain circumstances where it's going to be uncomfortable for most people to ride or walk on those facilities. The charts down below show how we determine what level of service or what level of traffic stress an existing or planned facility is at, and that's based on the roadway classifications, based on the posted speed limit, it's based on the type of facility that's there, and it's based on the volumes, the traffic volumes. So generally, the higher the volumes, the higher the speeds, and the less separated the facility is away from the roadway, the higher the LTS is, and it goes the other way too. So the standard that we adopted for pedestrian facilities, I'll start with those, says that for our new facilities and then eventually our existing facilities, for pedestrians, we set a minimum LTS of 2. So that means the facilities are targeted to be either LTS 1 or 2, meaning they're comfortable for a wide range of users. And our standards currently, so our design standards that we have, the cross sections for the roadways that we have in the design standards reflect that. For the bike facilities, it's a little more complicated. The bike facilities, we came up with standards that are based on where the bike facilities sit on our bike route network. We identified a bike route network, which is a network of bike facilities that feed from the neighborhoods to collector bike networks to transit facilities, and then to the regional bike facilities. So depending on where a bike facility is on that network, if it's a regional facility, it has a standard of LTS 1. If it is a priority route, meaning it's a more common route that feeds into those regional facilities, it's a 2. And then if it's an auxiliary route, which is the lower level classification shown on the orange on this map, which is again in the appendix of the plan, those have an minimum LTS of 3. Based on our current inventory, all of our regional routes have an LTS of 1. So these are routes like the Interurban Trail. So it's about 6 miles of those all currently meet. For our priority routes that feed into those regional trails, about half of them meet our level of service or the LTS standards. And then for the auxiliary routes, about 3/4 of those meet. In the plan itself, we went through and identified the routes that don't meet our current standards, what would need to be there to meet the current standards, and we have a list of what those improvements would need to be, and those improvements are actually embedded into those interactive maps. So you can click on a bike route and see what it is today and see what it would need to be to meet our LTS standard. Okay, on to the next mode. The next mode is transit. Transit has a little bit different approach because we, as a city, we don't own or operate transit facilities. Instead, we have transit operators that operate within the city. And so our approach towards transit level service takes a focus on how we prioritize the investments in access to transit. So how do we prioritize our investments in the active transportation facilities, bikes and bike lanes and sidewalks that feed into the transit stops and transit facilities? And then also, how do we prioritize our recommendations, our engagement when we engage with the different transit agencies? How are we setting what our priorities are to try to encourage different or expanded service? So we started with, again, an inventory of the transit services available in Auburn. So on the left, you see that we have, we'll soon have frequent routes, which would be the rapid ride, the I-Line rapid ride that's coming soon to the city. Most of our routes that we have throughout the city, provided by King County Metro in general, are local routes with a medium level service. And then we have the DART and the express routes. DART would be the dial ride transit service, and the express routes would be like the 497 that comes from Lakeland during the peak commute times between Lakeland Hills and the transit center. On the right-hand side is maps that's included in the plan that shows all the existing routes as well as the existing stops.
Jacob, do you mind taking questions now?
Oh, yeah, sure. That give me that. Great.
These routes that you said we're gonna be getting, how often do they go around?
So it varies on the type of service, but if you're looking at the I-Line, which is the rapid ride that's planned to come to the city, it varies from 10 minutes to 20 minutes. I think they said they average somewhere in the 10 to 15 minute range though.
And
Interim Deputy Mayor Yolanda Troutman. Wow.
thank you. And are they just gonna go one straight line, or are they gonna make the circle around? Do you know?
So when we talk about the I-Line, the I-Line actually runs back and forth between Auburn Station and then all the way up to Renton, I believe.
Okay.
It goes back and forth.
Yeah, so it goes between Auburn Station and Renton Station through Kent. And so it is a direct pathway through the city. It doesn't necessarily serve all of the city. It
Okay.
serves one corridor.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Baldwin?
Do we know when the I-Line is gonna be operational?
I believe the last update we heard was 2026. I don't have an exact month though on that. It's been a little bit of a moving target, but I know that we've been working closely with them on the design and the permitting for that, and that's getting fairly close to getting through that process. So the transit level service standards, we developed a similar approach to the active transportation where we have a chart and we identify level service 1, 2, 3, or 4. The best transit level service would be a 1, where the lowest would be a 4. And what this does is you can take any point throughout the city, you can say, what's the transit level of service here? And that's based on how close that spot is to the different types of transit that's available, or the best type of transit that's available for that location. So for instance, downtown here, we are within a quarter-mile walkshed of the Auburn Station. So up on the top right, that would be a transit level service 1. If you go up on the hills, there's several areas that are a mile or more away from any type of transit, and those locations would be a transit level service 4. So looking at the map of the entire city here, the green would be transit level service 1, the blue would be transit level service 2, the yellowish color in between is 3, and then the orangish color would be the transit level service 4 up on West Hill, parts of Lee Hill, and then down in southeast Auburn. So how do we use this? One, this is a map to help us, help guide us as where we advocate for additional transit services. So we have different statements in the comprehensive plan that are based on this map, but for the most part, we're advocating for better services in those areas that don't have service right now, or have a service that is maybe at a 3. And then in areas that do have service, so mainly in the areas of service, level service, transit service 1 and 2, what we do is we look at prioritizing our investments in those areas for people to be able to access that transit. So we're looking to build sidewalks, fill sidewalk gaps. We're looking to build bike lanes. We're looking to make it as comfortable as possible for people to access that transit, to encourage mode shifts, to encourage them to use those transit facilities, use active transportation instead of hopping in their car. The next mode of travel is freight. The freight in Auburn consists of a few different types of moving goods, or different ways to move goods throughout the city. Obviously, we're historically a railroad town, so we have several railroads that move through the city, and part of this looks at the interaction between those different modes of travel I've already talked about and the railroads themselves. So our policy sections and an action section talks about how we can look at railroad crossings, how we can look at areas adjacent to the railroads to encourage safety and encourage basically the people to move across those areas as efficiently as possible. The freight also includes different types of truck routes. So all principal arterials in the city are identified as truck routes, as well as we have T1, T2, and T3 routes. T1 routes are really mostly out of our jurisdiction. Those are the freeways and the highways, the state routes that move through the city. That's over 10 million tons of freight per year. T2 are the 4 to 10 tons per year. T3 routes move 300,000 to 4 million. So most of our city streets that fall into those categories are those T3 routes, which are shown as the purple on the map. So a few different city streets, as well as SR 164, Auburn Way South, that falls into that category. And then we have a couple T2 routes, like 8th Street Southeast and 15th Street Southwest, where we're seeing quite a bit of freight movement there. And this map is, again, in your packet on PDF page 300. So the whole idea behind the level service standards for freight, first, the vehicle level service standards do apply to the freight movement that's happening on our city streets. So those level service A, B, C, D, E, those all apply to the trucks moving on city streets. Then we have standards that apply to truck routes as far as intersections, making sure the intersections are designed so the trucks can navigate through them without running over curbs and potentially hitting streetlights and poles and other things that we don't want to get hit. It's also looking at the adjacent land use to the freight routes, looking at the driveway widths, and looking at the pavement design, making sure the pavement's designed to adequately carry that truck traffic. We also look at ways in the comp plan to discourage trucks from using non-truck routes. Big ones downtown. We see trucks making their way through downtown all the time, even though we have tried to do as much as we can to discourage that. We have seen some improvement with some of the signage that we've placed, as well as outreach with some of the companies that provide navigation services. So still an issue. And then finally, another part of the freight service is working with our partners to help discuss the regional truck parking shortage and seeing how Auburn can help with that situation where appropriate. All right. Chapter 2 was a big one. That was really the big chunk of most of the work that we did over the last couple of years. Moving on to Chapter 3 is focused on safety. So the safety chapter it references a few of the policies that are included elsewhere, and then it references our comprehensive safety action plan. The comprehensive safety action plan is currently in its final draft and will actually be discussed next week with the City Council. Ultimately, it will be brought for adoption on October 7th. So we'll talk more about that next week. Chapter 4 includes the goals, policies, and actions. All the system plans have a similar type format here. You heard Bob talk about the goals, policies, and actions. So I will briefly go through the different goals. There are 11 different goals included in Chapter 4. The first four here, the first goal talks about how we plan the system. Our goal is to plan the transportation system in a way that complies with the Growth Management Act It improves safety for all types of travel, as that multimodal element. Supports the city's land use plan, and then is planned in a way that reduces greenhouse gas emissions. Goal 2 is to plan and implement the goal in a way that supports equity. Goal 3 is our safety goal. Our general safety goal is to significantly reduce or eliminate traffic fatalities and serious injuries through a safe systems approach. We will discuss that in more detail next week. The 4th goal is to comply with environmental laws and regulations. This again points to putting together policies and actions and standards that help support reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, helps to protect and enhance the environment, and then also takes into account economic, human health and safety factors, and environmental justice. So the 5th goal, again, references the multimodal system, but really this goal is focused on having an accessible system to all. So this is where ADA compliance comes into play, and making sure that we're addressing barriers as we can and building new systems that provide access to everybody. The 6th goal is where we make our statement about the multimodal level service standards, and the policies in Goal 6 are the policies that set all those multimodal level service standards that we talked about. Goal 7 is to maintain concurrency. Concurrency is a requirement of the Growth Management Act. Concurrency is making sure that there are adequate facilities, in this case transportation systems, available to growth and development as it occurs, so that we're not having growth and development happening that's causing impacts to the existing systems. This involves developers doing mitigation, providing frontage improvements, paying traffic impact fees. It also involves the city doing planning activities and implementing projects to help address those capacity needs as well. Goal 8 is to manage the system in a way that doesn't solely rely on capacity improvements, but also uses transportation demand management. An example of that is the commute trip reduction program that we manage here at the city. We work with some of our largest employers throughout the city to suggest and support their efforts to reduce peak trip commutes, as well as transportation system management strategies. Those are strategies that we use with our ITS, or intelligent transportation systems, where we have different monitoring and sensors and programs to help move traffic more efficiently through the city. So the last 3 goals and policies are related to right-of-way or property rights needed for the city's transportation systems, asset management, and parking. So the goal of the right-of-way goal is to preserve the existing right-of-way and also obtain new right-of-way as needed to support our existing system, but also our expanded system. And we actually have an example of that tonight that we'll be talking about on the next agenda item. And then asset management, we've heard a lot. Bob talked quite a bit about asset management, but basically this is designing, constructing, and preserving the city's transportation facilities in the most cost-effective way. An example of the policies and then the actions associated with the asset management are pavement preservation programs that you hear us talking quite a bit about, as well as traffic signal replacement programs, bridge maintenance, inspection, and repair programs, pavement striping and channelization, where we go out and put new markings on the pavement. So quite different components to the asset management program. And then finally, the 11th last goal is to ensure a balance between on-street and off-street parking, which really is focused on making sure that as development happens, that they provide adequate parking or other approaches to ensure that we're not having cars parking on our streets that cause potential safety and operational issues. Chapter 5, this addresses the management, maintenance, and operations of the city's transportation systems. This is where we talk about our existing staffing. It talks about potential needs for future staffing to support our expanded system. It talks about the equipment that we have, the fleet that we have, both now and what we anticipate needing in the future. It talks about our existing facilities, and then, of course, talks about expanded facilities that we believe we need, both in the existing and the future conditions. Some of those have been identified by the facilities master plan that is referenced in this plan. And then, again, we talk about the asset management, which I was just referring to. Chapter 6 is all about funding. So this is chapter talks about how the transportation operations and capital investments are funded. So this chapter provides a summary of existing and potential funding sources for our transportation systems. We also talk about strategies and priorities to address potential funding shortfalls. And then we have a breakdown of what our anticipated operating costs and capital costs are and the existing and potential future revenues to cover those. So just as an example here, over the 20-year period, the operations costs are just shy of $340 million, and the capital costs over the 20-year period are anticipated to be $320 million. Overall, with the existing and the projected revenues, some of which are simply that projected or ideas, haven't been secured yet. We see a balanced system financially, but that's going to be still going to rely on smart implementation and discussions about some of those funding revenue sources, and of course, successful grant applications and awards. This is just a little bit more detailed about the capital projects and programs. So you saw the list before of the projects that are identified to help address capacity issues. Those are about $123 million. If you look at the asset management, so this is just those programs I mentioned about the pavement preservation, the bridges and traffic signals. Those equate to about $162 million over the 20-year period. We do have an identified program funded at $20 million over the 20-year period to invest in mode shift projects. So that's building out our bike networks, building out our sidewalks to help improve convenient and accessible access to transit, to encourage that mode shift. And then we have safety programs, so about $11 million in purely just safety programs. Now keep in mind, anything that we do is going to look at opportunities to address any type of safety concerns or issues that we might have out there. And we're going to talk more about that next week as well. And then finally, we have about $4 million in transit partnership routes for a total of that $320 million. So the last chapter talks about annual updates. So we do have the opportunity to produce annual updates to this as needed. We do have a mandatory requirement that's new this year to do a semi-full update, but not as comprehensive as this one is in 5 years. That will really be analysis, some modeling again to see how we're doing from a level of service standpoints on all modes of travel, to see how the different policies and standards that we're implementing with this plan, how they're doing before we get too far along, to see if we need to make any adjustments. And then we'll be required to do a full plan update again in 10 years. And the chapter then also talks about some of the accomplishments that we have made since the last full plan update in the last update in 2019. The last full plan update was done in 2015, actually. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you, Jacob. Questions, going first with Interim Deputy Mayor Trout-Manuel.
Thank you. Yes, on your 11 goals, what's the timeline that you're looking to reach most of them?
So those goals will be in place throughout the life of the plan, which is 20 years, and I suspect long thereafter. I don't think there's something that we say we've reached the goal, we're done. They're ongoing because they really support the ongoing policies and the actions that we will take on a continuous basis to have a transportation system.
Good answer. Thank you.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Thanks. So one of the questions I have is on page 174, where we're looking at the map of the city and seeing where we have areas that have the low transit level of service. It has a bullet that says advocate for expanded and improved transit service in those areas. What do we mean by advocate and for, what do we mean by advocate there?
Well, we often are at the table and involved with conversations with groups like King County Metro, where they are expanding or looking at changes to service. We will be giving them our input and discussing with them potential opportunities. An example of that right now is with the opening of the Federal Way Link Light Rail. They're looking at some service changes to help improve service to that. And they asked us to provide some input on that, and so we are advocating for potential flex service in the West Hill area and then potentially in other areas downtown.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that, because that was one of the, well, really two of the other questions that I had is that I know when we were at our leadership retreat earlier this year, I had brought up that some of the other neighborhoods in South King County have flex service available to them. And so I wasn't sure if that's something that we wanted to incorporate in our future planning. You know, right now, if we're referencing the I-Line, which is 2026, the Federal Way Light Rail for Star Lake and the Federal Way Transit Center would also be, I think, targeted for 2026. And so to me, it's interesting to not see those as part of our planning, at least within this roll-up. So I didn't know if maybe that was lurking in the extra, 500 odd pages that were there. I'll be up front this weekend. I did not have time to spend as much as I typically would. So I was curious if we are in the advocacy looking to do more with those services, either in getting people from Lee Hill into the I-Line, West Hill into the light rail, and what we were looking at as far as Lakeland, or pardon me, the Lake Taps region.
So yes, we are currently advocating. We are currently working it, and we just recently, as recent as last week, gave some comments back to King County Metro's in support of expanding the flex area into the West Hill. That would provide the connections that you referenced, as well as looking at an Auburn flex area, which that area has not been established yet, but there are discussions about it. Different potential areas where that would be applicable that would need to match with King County Metro's grant funding that they have. So they're looking at equity as a component to that, as a requirement to that grant. But it certainly would have to connect to the Auburn station, either from Lee Hill or from the Valley or some other area. But yeah, there's definitely advocation.
Okay.
Councilmember Baldwin.
And then another area that we had talked about as far as potential future service changes would also be in advocating for the Sounder to switch more to being a lifestyle service, so being more runs throughout the full course of the day. Is that also part of our strategy for the next 10 years, 20 years?
In our outreach, we heard that comment a couple times, and I think in our discussions with Sound Transit, we do pass on what we hear when we do that outreach. That generally is not going to be a primary focus of our transportation system as far as addressing some of the AM and PM peak commute times, but it is certainly something that we have heard from some people. So we do pass it along as we hear it.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Okay. And then from kind of that mapping strategy standpoint, do we see the opportunity to have more east-west connections, or would you lean strictly more into the flex programs?
Well, the flex program is in itself, the ones that we were looking at, I mean, the one on West Hill would provide mostly a connection over to the Federal Way. So that is east-west in a certain aspect. The ones we were looking at in Auburn, the one, if it went up to Lee Hill, that would be an east-west connection from Lee Hill down into the valley. And so, yeah, they're there. And we also work closely with the Muxu Indian tribe that provides a great east-west connection from the plateau to and from downtown area. So,
And then with the transit planning, do we have any routes that are currently serving Auburn? I know we have some that go up into Renton and different places. Do we have anything connecting us with Tacoma to the south?
Beside the S line, the Sound Transit Rail line that connects us
Yes.
to Tacoma?
From like a bus standpoint.
Certain. I don't know if there's a direct route into Tacoma. It might involve a couple transfers, but.
I'm not sure, but I think Express, the one from the 15th station, would go to Tacoma. Maybe. I'm not sure. I ride past before, so I know like most of the time northeast is not connected to southeast. So if you wanna go to southeast, you need to get in the downtown in the station to get the bus. So I ride it. That was long time ago, like 15 years ago.
Yeah, I don't think there's a direct bus connection between Auburn and Tacoma. I think there's a connection between Auburn and the Federal Way Transit Station, and then from Federal Way Transit Station down to Tacoma. I also know that in Pierce Transit's plans, they also are looking at potentially changing our 497 and potentially making that a connection into, I believe, the Fife area to then connect into Tacoma.
Yeah.
You're amazing for knowing all the buses and the information.
Councilmember Baldwin.
And so the reason I'm asking about kind of that language of advocacy is because when I look at the budget and I see on page 183 of the packet, the funding forecast and revenue forecast that we have for these projects, I see that the very last line on there is other for transit partnership routes. And so with that being at $200,000 a year, I think my question is, if we wanted to significantly ramp that up, are our options advocating, advocacy, or are there options to say, hey, we want to prioritize having additional routes within the city, and would we have to be coming out of pocket for that? So do we have the opportunity to work with King County and say, if there are routes that we want service, to bring those requests to them?
So I'm gonna jump in really quick. So a big portion of that is whether or not Pierce Transit and King County Metro have the bus capacity for additional routes before they can even entertain us potentially funding portions of routes. Right now, neither of those agencies have that bus capacity until they build additional bus capacity in their systems. So the amount that you see in that plan is specifically for that Route 497 express service, which is actually a three-way joint agreement between us, Pierce Transit, and King County Metro. And that is a unique agreement in how we have done that. Are we interested in potentially doing others in the future? Sure, but we need that capacity from those transit systems.
Any more questions, Council? Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Know how much work goes into those presentations, so thank you. All right, next up is ordinance, let me go back. Ordinance number 6958. Director Gao.
Yeah, and so Jacob's going to stay up there with you, and then Kim Trom, one of our project engineers, is going to join him to explain Ordinance 6958 and the R Street Southeast project and the condemnation process.
We got some backup this time. Awesome.
Fantastic.
All right, well, thanks again. This is Kim Trump, project engineer, City of Auburn, and I'm Jacob Sweeting. So we'll be talking about Ordinance 6958. So Ordinance 658. This ordinance establishes that Project 2116 R Street Southeast widening is a public use. So the R Street widening project, Kim's going to give you some more details on what that project does. The ordinance also establishes that the acquisition of property rights included in the ordinance are necessary to complete the project, and that the acquisition of the property rights for this project provides a public purpose or a public benefit. The ordinance also authorizes acquisition through condemnation with just compensation paid to owners. We'll say that this doesn't mean that if this ordinance goes through, we're going out and condemning property the next day. This is really just the first step in the right-of-way acquisition process. The next step is for us to actually go out, make contact with the property owners, work with appraisers to determine what the fair compensation is, make offers, and then start negotiations and try to reach settlement. So what is the public benefit? Why are we doing the R Street widening project? So really the R Street Southeast Widening Project is one of many different R Street projects that we have currently underway. Those projects all are working to address heavy congestion on R Street, in particularly in the PM commute time. The southbound lanes back up frequently and cause excessive delays beyond our level service standards, so up in the E category that we were looking at, which is not good. Those queues, the backup at the intersections block driveways, they block roadways, they block crosswalks, and create issues for the traveling public. And also, the projects are intended to improve accessibility to and through the neighborhoods. The intention is to move traffic better through our street so that the traffic doesn't try to move through those neighborhoods and cut through those neighborhoods. We also have a corridor, our street, where there's a park, Game Farm Park. There are several nearby schools and neighborhoods, and there's the White River Trail. So the improvements are all intended to help improve access from those neighborhoods to those different amenities on a trail system and sidewalks that feel comfortable to the users. In 2020, we completed a study of the R Street corridor that recommended a few different projects to implement those improvements. The first project is the roundabout at 21st and R Street, which is currently under design. The next one is the 29th Street, R Street Southeast intersection signal improvements. That's actually embedded into the R Street widening project that we're talking about here. And that also included adding a second southbound lane to R Street between 21st and 33rd. And then also adding a two-way left turn lane to R Street between or south of 33rd over down to the White River Bridge. That is currently underway and probably almost paved out, almost. It's the one that's been under construction, the one we've talked about several times. So the last bullet on the list, that one is nearing completion. Next will be the roundabout, and then this widening project that we're talking about will be the last of those projects in the corridor.
All right, good evening. So to put the projects with the improvements that Jacob mentioned, the projects on a map. So this map shows the locations of those projects. Like he said, on the north end is the R and 21st roundabout project design. And just south of it is the R Street widening, which is the projects associated with this ordinance that we're discussing today. And south end, just south of 33rd, is the R Street reservations. And yes, we are very close to completing the projects. The roadway are pretty much paved out except for the trail, which is actually happening tomorrow. So that's exciting. So the next few slides, I'll go over some brief details about the R Street widening project, which is project CP 2116. So this is a road plot showing the layout of the proposed improvements along the corridor. So starting on the south end at 33rd Street, this is where the preservation project ends. We're gonna pick up from there. So this is on the upper left-hand corner of the screen there. So we're bringing the improvements all the way up to 22nd, which is where we'll connect onto the R Street and 21st roundabout project. So this is a typical roadway sections for the corridor. So currently there's one lane going northbound, one lane going southbound, and bike lane on both sides of the road. We're proposing to add a second southbound lane from 22nd to 31st Street, and then adding a multi-use path on the west side of the road, which is starting at the north end of the Game Farm Park entrance all the way up to 22nd. And there will also be a buffer or a landscape strip that will separate the roadway from the multi-use path. And then on the east side of the road, we'll have a 7-foot sidewalk. We'll also be replacing any replacing or repairing any roadway pavement that are damaged this project. And then in regard to electrical work, we'll be installing new street lighting system along the corridor. Also adding pedestrian lighting along the multi-use path as well. We'll be replacing and upgrading the existing traffic signal at 29th and R, and then adding a new full traffic signal at Gainthorne Park entrance. So this will replace the existing pedestrian signal at 31st. That's just a bit south of the park entrance there. And then lastly, we'll upgrade the storm drainage and the water system infrastructures along the corridor. So with all the proposed improvements, there are additional property needs. We will be needing property rights from 13 different property along the corridor. So I want to mention that all of the property rights that are needed are partial taking along the street frontage. There won't be any full takes or relocations. The needed property rights kind of varies between or combinations of either a permanent right-of-way acquisitions, a slope easement, and or a temporary construction easement. So why do we need the ordinance? So the R Street widening projects provides public benefits, right? It's going to install infrastructures that improve traffic operations and ease congestions along the corridor, and providing convenience and comfortable access for all non-motorized user. Overall, it will improve safety for all the user. So we're gonna make all the effort to work with the property owner, like Jacob said. We will appraise at a fair market values for these property needs, and then we'll negotiate at good faith with the property owners and providing a fair market value compensation for these property needs. However, if negotiation fails and this condemnation ordinance will help pursue a timely acquisitions of these property rights. So in turn, it will minimize the risk of delaying the projects. So here's a look at the project schedule. So we're currently in design. Design actually started in 2023. We're going through the permitting process as well. So we're hoping to finalize the design phase and obtaining all the required permits that we need by 2026. And then the property acquisition is actually happening right now and concurrently with the design phase. And we're hoping to wrap that phase up by the end of next year. Now the start of construction is really going to depend on the permitting and the property acquisition process. So it depends how that goes. But we're really hoping to start construction probably toward the end of 2026, maybe early 2027, and be able to wrap up and finish construction by the end of 2028. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Jacob, which he kind of mentioned earlier, but these are the next steps.
Thanks. So our next steps, we will be sending formal notifications to the property owners, which is required per state law. We'll also be making a publication in the newspaper. So every single property owner that's impacted by the property rights acquisition will get a certified letter notice. We'll also put a newspaper article out to make sure that they hear that the ordinance is being considered. The ordinance itself will be brought forward to the City Council at the October 21st meeting for consideration and potential adoption. Assuming that the condemnation ordinance is passed, we will move forward with scheduling the appraisal meetings. We gave each property owner the opportunity to be present at the appraisals and walk through with the appraiser to help point out things that maybe the appraiser didn't see. We also talk about any required relocation. In this case, we're not relocating any people, but sometimes people have a shed or a fence or, I don't know, a rose bush, a car, something. But we, as part of the Uniform Relocation Act, are required to offer the service to move those or provide the money for them to move those. So we will start the negotiations and work through the negotiations and settlements and hopefully the closings. Of course, a piece of that sometimes involves working with the banks. If there's banks involved that we need to clear encumbrances on the title, then we'll do that as well. And then if there's any negotiations that stall or fail, then we would potentially take a file a condemnation petition if that's necessary, and then move forward with that process to make sure that we secure those property rights and can complete this project.
Council, any questions? Councilmember Baldwin.
For our street south of 33rd, is that sufficiently wide without being included within the project?
We do, yeah, we were able to fit everything within the existing right of way.
Council, any other questions? Council, Interim Director, or Deputy Mayor, I should say, Troutman Well.
Thank you. This is for either one of you. Since that's a very busy street, and we have several of those homes with the driveways facing State-Pola, are they gonna have to change how they're gonna come into their homes now, or how is that gonna affect their?
So so yes, there are some driveway that are fronting the street. It depends on which location along our street, but usually the property rights that we need are typically between 29th or 24th and 25th. We are able to, once we make the improvements, we would work with transitioning those driveway and making sure that it transitions smoothly into the driveway. We're not anticipating having to reroute any of the driveway or any of the access on the property at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Council, any other questions? No? Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Kim, right? Yes, Kim. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the special focus area for Public Works. I will hand it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Taylor. At this time, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. Come back in 7:22.
Yes.
so I sent you an email, or Kate, I had Katie sent you an email earlier today, that there's a problem with the notice. And so you have to download the full packet and review it through the full packet.
I told him, and I made sure they heard.
So, yeah, he's not gonna be able to do that for you. You have to download the full packet.
My nail guy, Glamour Nails and
Oh, the store, the one.
So, go
Glamour
down.
Nails, it's in like,
Up, up.
it's right, it's next to Starbucks. Oh,
During my fingernails myself.
I know you
No,
do
sorry.
a really good job. I don't have, but
Just so we, the one here, in the 15th of Lawful, it's in the small lady near the cycle.
I know. And I mean, I kept like, ow.
They must be working at it as we speak.
I have not been able to.
Yeah, so, there we go. So,
Oh,
for the,
it's in Glamour, like,
I love your mouse and mouse pad. Look at
the,
that.
I know,
the
right?
vendor must be working on the system.
I love it.
But you can look here and you can,
Yeah.
for being a gearhead like this.
it's not letting you do that. So you're gonna have to go through,
He doesn't have a computer. He
I
has
have
Oh.
the system here, so I'll just.
yeah, so you're gonna have to
Yeah.
use
I was
the,
gonna say, you
the online system.
It's
Well,
the first.
The one that Jonathan downloaded for you, you'll have to use that. Do you still have it? Well, Jonathan downloaded for you, be in your downloads.
yes, yes. It's too bad.
So there's the full packet again.
Tammy. She gave me a gift card. Didn't use it. So now I've got a $50 gift card that I'm never gonna use.
There's a
just
file
raffle
on my
it to
computer, because so I
somebody.
can't open it here.
Yeah,
You
donate
one
it to a
second.
raffle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I've figured, but it'll be an anonymous donation because I don't want them to associate my name with them.
Lost a lot of business.
Anonymous donation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
My favorite
It said
kind.
$35 for
Anonymous.
pedicure. And she was pushing me out the door.
No.
Did you get a cup of coffee?
Money to give.
Nah, cause then I'll be up like,
I said,
really up.
$100 for
I'll be
2
good.
pedicures. It said $35 for the gel. It's $15 more for the gel.
They charge me.
Well, let's see here.
Yes, $10. Yeah, so it's on my
Yeah,
lap.
then as I was saying, you know, she tries to hand me $5 back from $100. And I go, no, just keep it. And
I had to get coffee to wake up.
yeah. Uh-huh. No, well, and that's, as I said, I won't say who I was, so I will never.
Okay, yes.
Just one second.
Parked across the street, and so as I'm in the car, starting it up, she comes running out with money in her hand. And it's, I just drove away. Lucky said, Mom, don't hit her, don't hit her. It's fine.
Sorry, council, I was working on these files earlier today, and you can't have them open in two places.
I'm here.
I feel sometimes I feel to stand sitting, it's hard. Clinton,
Yes.
I think you're like me, you like to stand, not sit too much.
Say again?
You like to stand between. No,
I have a raise up desk at work.
oh yeah.
Okay.
I work, I move
Same.
around so
And I
hard.
stand the whole time.
That ain't the issue tonight, though.
Council, we're calling the meeting back to order at 7:25. And next on the agenda is council discussion, resolution number 5782, provided by Councilmember Amir, Chair of the Council Rules and Procedures Ad Hoc Committee. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
So council, when we did this last time, again, I am simply here to facilitate your discussion to ensure we have a consensus. I wanted to real quick just kind of remind everybody of your current roles regarding debates. Just a real high overview, we are talking to the full body. It is not a conversation between two people. Address your comments to the full group and ensure that you are recognized by the chair of this section, Councilmember Amir, and remember the deportment and courtesy that we all would like to have during this portion. I think that this piece might be just a little bit more challenging than last time, so let's just make sure we wanted to share your rules. So last time we went through section 5 completely, and we got to section 6. Within section 6, there was a few changes that were suggested by council members. Six 6.3 regarding council training. The proposed updates are here in your packet. Section 6.3 itself, are there any concerns with this current update?
Go ahead, Councilmember.
Yeah, I was just asking if we wanted to go through it for folks in this session, as far as feedback or input for the different elements that were recommended for this section.
Any comment?
I didn't understand. I didn't understand that.
So do you mean like 6.3 here and then we go to 6.31? So we're at 6.3, this is the portion.
That's the recommended changes.
Yep, and so is there anybody who has just the portion that's highlighted here? Is there consensus for the changes that have been made just in the highlighted portion?
Go ahead, Councilmember.
Thank you. I just wanted to include in there on the training that AWC has the 30 hours and the 60 hours training for professionalism. And I was wondering if we could add that in there. Because it just says this includes initial orientation and after taking office. AWC offers leadership courses, and they're 30 hours and 60 hours for any of us council if we want to take on some leadership positions.
Go ahead, Councilmember.
Are you talking about the municipal certificates? That was added in another section. But it could be added in this section.
I was looking and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I just read it. It's one of our corrections. But it could be added in that section.
Council Taylor. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. I think that I'm okay with the way this is written, because it basically says that you can participate in trainings through AWC. I don't know if we I mean, we can, but I don't know if we necessarily need to, specify in detail what the trainings are. Because this section is saying that individuals, shall participate in trainings offered by agencies and organizations, including but not limited to the ARAWC. So it's saying that you can participate in these trainings. So what if someone wanted to participate in more than those hours? So I think this, for me, just my own personal, I think this is good with the way it's written.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to give Councilmember Troutman kind of a maybe refresher update. So on page 480, the 6.4 is what's currently in place, and the recommended changes for the 6.3 section, I had put together basically to give more detail for folks who are inbound. And so it goes through the different areas of training that would be expected, what would fall under maybe a space of being required versus recommended, and then just making sure that that is added into rules and procedures really to document. Because as we've had folks who've come in kind of midstream from the cycle, making sure that they would have a point of reference to say, hey, I'm here, what do I do? And it lays it all out. I think perhaps a little bit more intentionally than what we had previously in the 6.4 for rules and procedures.
Go ahead.
Where do you propose to put that at?
So in section 6, page 480, instead of the highlighted council training, which it may be hard to see the screen from this angle. I know I can't really see it.
Here.
There you go.
Sorry.
Yeah, I've been looking over their heads most of the meeting. The 6.4 is what's currently there in rules and procedures, and then the recommended changes are at the back of the section and now being shown, which takes us through a fair chunk that really expands that considerably.
Sean, do you have in the computer there when we turned in our changes?
Mhm.
Because that was one of mine, and I don't know what section it got put in, but I know it's in there somewhere.
So this is the combined,
Figure out where it's at.
so this is the combined section
Notes from the last
of
one,
notes
yeah.
from what everybody provided me.
Mhm.
And so this is the portion for section 6 that was provided to me.
Sorry. Can I say my comment? I know the change, you want it to be specific, but I think what we have in our rules, it's really covering. This maybe we added somewhere like as a, what you can do more. If you look to what we have, and the highlight one, it's cover everything. I know you wanna give it as example for the others. I'm not sure how we can, if we have something at the end called like.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah, so part of the reason for expanding out the section is I thought that the current language was really vague, and because it says and other required or recommended training, so it doesn't actually provide it. So if we were to look at the recommended changes, I'd be happy to go through the different sections of it, but basically it lays out what resources we would get. So it would say we would get a current copy of the Mayor and Councilmember Handbook produced by AWC and MRSC, a current copy of Mastering Council Meetings, a guidebook for elected officials and local governments from Jurassic Parliament. Required training would be completed within 6 months, working with directors, the deputy mayor or interim deputy mayor, and other council members to ensure that those are scheduled and completed, which I think is already standard practice. And that of those trainings, that would include the elected officials workshop, which I think is already standard, the NeoGov training, which I think from the HR standpoint, I know when I came on, it took me a really long time to do it, and probably would have been better if I had had something saying, go do it within 6 months, because that's, we signed up for it. And then the department overviews, which we already do by practice, reviewing council process for submitting new business with either the deputy mayor or interim, so just making sure people know how to bring stuff forward. Likewise, a review of the process for submitting to the clerk, so that way if you wind up on a special focus area, you know how to do it. And then the regular facility tours that we would have for City Hall, the new hire tour for the White River Valley Museum, and just calling out that progress against that is something that, that would be tracked to make sure that that's taking place. So it would be the mayor, deputy mayor, and that individual council member making their way through that progression, and then just calls out other recommended trainings. So I don't think it's anything more than what we already do as council members. I think it just gives that specificity, so that way if anyone says, like when we have Civics Academy, hey, I want to run, what does it mean when you are in your first year? Bam, it's answered. It's kind of wild to see it all in one place, but I know we've all been going through it.
Sorry, go ahead.
The only reason I brought it up is because I remember when we first came into council, AWC was really pushing for us to get our 30 hours and 60 hours training, and you can get those anywhere. From when you go to any type of training, you can get 3.3 hours, 4 hours. You can accumulate those hours to go towards your certificate. That certificate, you go to AWC webpage, and it shows you right there where to implement your 30 hours. They sent you your certificate. It takes a little while. And then your 60 hours you do too. And that is for you to have leadership training and how to do. They basically cover everything that we basically do, but you earn a certificate from AWC.
Go ahead.
I would be comfortable if we wanted to add that into the recommended section as kind of a reminder. If folks don't know that it's out there, it could be a helpful reference to suggest the AWC leadership certificates.
It's the municipal certificates.
Leadership.
30 hour and 60 hours.
I have a comment. I feel usually when you write the rules, this should be separate because it need update. It's not should be tying our rules and procedure, because I know like doing the official elected, it's required by state. Some tour we doing it, so we should not specific name. And there is way to add it as a recommended. Sean, do you think like what we
These are
did?
your roles. I don't make a recommendation.
As an example done before, you remember like how we have our code of conduct separate. We call it N, like check. That's what I mean. It shouldn't call
It's an
in.
appendix.
Maybe something like this. That's mine. Go ahead, Kate.
So I'm hearing there's not necessarily an issue with the content other than the recommendation to add the AWC municipal certs into the recommended section. Does it hurt to just add it into the section 6? Does it really need to shift to an appendix? Because I don't see it being any different being in one part of the document versus another.
Go ahead.
So I'm under the impression that any training that we do with AWC is leadership anyway. So, I mean, they have different courses, different classes, but from what I understand, when we first went, when we were sworn in, it was we were learning everything already in that first day. So I'm confused on where the difference lies between what we learned the first time to a leadership standpoint.
Hold on. Go ahead.
So what's being referred to are the certificates of municipal leadership. And then there is an advanced certificate of municipal leadership. And those are attained by attending conferences and other trainings. I think Councilmember Taylor went to the budgeting.
The budget one, yeah.
Right, so though there is a record that is tracked of all of those different sessions that you attend, the Days in Olympia, the Action Days, or the annual conference, you receive credits for attending the sessions while you're there. And once you have accumulated enough credits in each one of the different categories, you can apply for your CML. And then once you have completed additional training, you can apply for your advanced CML. So I believe that's what interim deputy mayor is referring to in this. But I was at our board retreat for AWC this week, and some of that may be changing. I mean, it may take a while, but that's why sometimes it's better maybe not to be quite so prescriptive and specific, because things can change. Just like under 6.33, I was going to recommend that maybe instead of required training will include, required training may include, because things could change. We may not give the White River Valley Museum new hire tour any longer. There could be reasons that some of these things are not what would occur or are applicable.
Mm-hmm.
And then just one more thing under 6.32, it's referring to council staff. There is no council staff. So just staff will work with directors is what I would recommend, because there is no council staff.
Okay, so let's do with the first concurrence. Do we have concurrence that we want to add this section to section 6 of your current council rules?
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't see, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I don't see where it would hurt anything, because it's just another way of accumulating. And you just go on the computer and put in where you went and took a training, even in NLC when AWC meets up there at our conferences, we get hours for that as well, just for attending the welcoming reception that we have and stuff,
So interim deputy mayor.
we used to.
No,
Yes.
that's not how it works.
I'm sorry, I don't think I was very clear in my
Okay.
question.
I
think it was-
apologize.
No, I think it was me. I don't think I was very clear. These suggested changes that we have here at section 6.3, do we have concurrence from the 6 council members that are here that we would like any of this to be added to your current council rules?
Go ahead.
Can I add something before we do that? Maybe for a compromise, we could put suggested instead of you have to do it.
I didn't say you have to.
Well, yeah, I know, but you
I'm
know what
sorry,
I'm saying.
council,
I
council,
apologize.
don't talk together. It's here,
Yeah.
the talk about what we have here, the language. That's what, yes, sure. Go ahead.
I think if I understand where our clerk is going, I think she's asking in general, are we comfortable with it? And then we can go through and modify the pieces of it that we would like to tweak and adjust. Is
Yes,
that the
that is
better
accurate,
understanding of
yes.
the question?
So do I have concurrence?
Yes.
Okay. So if I have concurrence, that we will add this to section 6, and part of the resolution will be that we'll add it appropriately numbered. Section 6.3 here, is there any edits to this section that I've highlighted here?
Kate,
Oh, sorry, my bad. They're talking a different one.
No? Perfect. Section 6.31, are there any changes to suggested edits to section 6.31? No? Okay. Section 6.32, and so the mayor had suggested removing council and just saying staff. Do I have concurrence on that? Nope. Okay. Councilmember Emmer?
I would like to see suggest or recommended training instead of required training.
Can I speak first? Because we want to be inclusive. We don't know who the newest council will be here. They may be here, they may not be able to do it in 6 months. That's why it's good to be the language more welcoming, like not required in 6 months. We shouldn't require it in time. That's my thought. Go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, I'm open to how we would want to address that. I think the goal I had is that we would have a separation between things that we would say, as council members, we do have certain things that should be required training for serving in this capacity. I think we can generally agree on that. And then the recommended is being a separate section of things that are above and beyond what we would consider kind of that minimum level of training for the work that we do. If we wanted to maybe reword that as something for 6.3.2 as required training should be targeted for completion within 6 months, which offers a little bit of both guidance and room, as you said, to be more accommodating for people coming in their first year.
Decide if what training specific you're talking about it to be completed in 6.
That's in the next section.
So because if you look here, if you go on the top, elected official, it need to be done with certain time from the state. So we are required to finish it even, I forget, I think they give us 3 months or something to finish the elected official workshop. It's required. The HR, it's done the first day, so that's some training. I know complete the training, but the language, like we be specific overview, it should be wide. It's not like, because we did all that for the training assigned by HR. We done it the day we came here. That's why we should say training, we keep it wide. Don't go over what run by the state because the state changed the requirement. We should not tie. This is what I'm thinking, but.
Councilmember?
Go ahead.
I just remembered where we had put that other one in a section, it's in the deputy mayor section. That they should have their municipal certificates for that. So just wanted to clear that up.
Okay.
Couldn't remember where it was at.
Go ahead, Clinton, Councilmember Taylor. Clinton Taylor.
6.32, trainings should be required, trainings would be. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I had it and lost it. Instead of required,
Targeted for completion.
trainings, just take the required out. Training should be completed within the first 6 months. It's kind of pretty straightforward. Because then it's, I mean, yeah, that's just, I would just take out the required part and just put trainings should be completed by each council member within the first 6 months.
Good language.
And then in 6.33, instead of training is required, I would just say trainings will include. Because as the mayor stated, I mean, you know, those could fluctuate and change and be, and altogether, I appreciate the detail, but some of these are, you know, I don't, anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Go ahead.
Yeah, like I said, the main reason for separating or for having required as part of the language was to separate it from what we see in 6.3.4, which is more about recommended. But if other council members are more comfortable shifting just to training shall be completed and training will include, I'm comfortable with that shift. We would also need to change that in 6.3.3.1.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you. Just a reminder that any of these trainings that are required to have staff involved is still at the mayor's discretion for the time involved with it in case something comes up that requires there to be focus in other areas. So whether you want to include that or not, I just want to make sure that that is clear, that anything that is going to commit staff still has to go through the mayor's office.
Thank you. Anyone has any questions? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think that was my goal with the 6.3.3.1 is noting that the progress would be tracked with the deputy mayor, interim deputy mayor, mayor, and that individual council member to reflect the fact that, to the mayor's point, there are many things on our director's plates. So again, more about guidance and not trying to force anything in there. And so I think that would also have been the impression for 6.3.2 is that they would be, working to get that scheduled and completed within that time frame. So I think that's fine.
Okay, so 6.3.2, I have removed required and council. Do I have consensus? Was there another edit? Should?
Yeah.
That's fine, that's fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
if that's okay.
Did I?
Should is fine.
Should?
Yeah, should.
Okay.
The only, my opinion, I think it should be, because we're adult, we will finish our training. So either we have the staff keep the record and the council. We don't need like either mayor, deputy mayor follow our training.
Well,
That's what I'm thinking.
Hmm.
You gonna say something? Oh.
Okay. The way I'm reading this is, what I'm seeing is like to work with directors of the deputy mayor, interim deputy mayor, to ensure that trainings are scheduled and completed, because when you're new, it gets really confusing doing all those, and so they're just reminding you
Okay.
that they have to be done.
So
They-
council,
Or we just go back to the original 6.4, which was council members shall participate in training offered by individual agencies, entities, and organizations, including but not limited to Association of Washington Cities and the State of Washington. For some reason, I'm just feeling like there's just so much wording in that.
so council, what I'm hearing as a consensus is the word required is uncomfortable. And you would like to change that to shall, or the word required and shall. Are we comfortable if I go through and make that a should and take that piece out? Okay. We will do that throughout this. Minus that, for 6.32, are we comfortable with the wording as it sits now? Okay. And it, like, this word is recommended now, based on,
No, I think it was just training.
Oh, okay.
Because that's all the standard, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the standard training.
Okay. Is there any edits to 6.33?
Oh,
That-
Mayor, sorry.
I had just recommended that say training may include.
So to give you the
Yeah.
option, I love that.
Yeah,
And it
in case any of those change, that makes sense.
correct. Okay. Go ahead, council members.
So are we not adding the certificate, the municipal certificates then?
They certainly
Go
can.
ahead.
Gotta forget to
I'm
call on
I'm
people.
thinking, like, I'm trying to digest the idea.
I think when we get to 6.4, that would be the recommended training. So typically, what I had identified as required when I first drafted it was intended to be those things that we already do as standard practice and just putting it into writing. So like I said, if someone comes in midstream, they know what they're supposed to be doing. The municipal certificates, well, I would recommend that we all get them. I think still fall more in that space of recommended versus standard training. So I'm for adding it, it's just not up yet.
Go ahead, May.
To go back to what I was mentioning before about how things can change, instead of calling out very specific facility tours, White River Valley Museum, could it just be trainings and tours as provided by the city?
Mhm.
So remove.
Just make it more, just simplify it more. I mean, I can appreciate
That's what I said.
Yeah.
it being bulleted out, but again, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Go ahead.
But to the mayor's point, I mean, these things change. And highlighting those and having it specifically detail what those things are works right now. But a year from now, you know, HR may have a different set of bullets for onboarding. I don't know. So.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I would just, again, from my perspective, I would leave them in mainly because this is meant to be guidance for the inbound folks who are coming in. And I had separated it here from some of the other tours that we have, looking at that sense of what are those things that you would need to be able to do and navigate more immediately versus over time. So in the later section, some of the other tours that we would have either with our own facilities or other regional partners would fall into that recommended space. I think City Hall is always important because when you come in, you may not know your way around the briefing rooms or the different offices and things for the folks that we would be working with more directly. And, I think this is a document that we have the ability to update, at will whenever we need. So I don't see the harm in leaving it in for the time being. And if something in fact does change and we would want to take it out in the future or modify it, that's available to us as an option. So if there's no harm, I would just leave it for now and keep pushing on.
Okay, so I need consensus of whether or not we want to change the bullets or not. Do I have consensus as it sits now,
I'm fine with it.
as it sits? So I've only seen 3 heads, I'm sorry, yes, okay. Okay, so as it sits now, we will leave it. 6.3.3.1. Is there any edits? We'll take out the required.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the goal with this bullet was just to make sure that that incoming person knows that they're not alone, and if they need to figure out who to go to, it gives them who they should be working with on these activities. So again, just guidance in that space.
Go ahead.
I really don't think it's necessary. I think we specify enough that interim deputy mayor or deputy mayor in all of this may or should training is outlined enough. I think this is just, honestly, it's unnecessary.
Got a shimmer.
Go ahead.
I think it should stay in there because I know when I was new, I didn't have a clue. I didn't have the training that they're doing now. I just came in and I just started doing my job and I didn't know who to go to. I always talked to the mayor, and then I found out that I had to talk to the deputy mayor. So I don't think this will hurt anything having this in there. It just helps the newbies that come in.
Okay, do I have consensus to add 6.3.3.1?
I'm fine with it.
Okay, I have 4 heads. 6.3.4, Is this section that you guys were asking to add the municipal leadership certificate?
Go ahead, he has a question or comment, go ahead.
There's council staff again there in that second line.
I think would be me, we should not specify what tour, we keep it open rather than, and we should like encourage to complete with first year of office. I think we all been almost we finished that, but this is depending on the director and how the situation. Some people last time when they get elected was COVID, so I think we need to keep it open without time. And keep it City of Auburn facility tour without name it. That's my opinion. Go ahead.
I think that this, we probably could just do without this whole section. Because going back to the mayor's point, a lot of these are directed by the directors and then obviously the mayor's office. And then a lot of these within the first year, I mean, in a perfect situation, it would probably work, but who knows what's going on at the score jail or the courts or different things. So this section right here, I would be okay with. I mean, I know it's for a new person coming in, but I don't see, like, this section I could do without, but, I mean.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think my question would be, if you were new and you didn't know that these were available for you to go tour and experience as a council member, if we don't have it written down, how would you know that you could ask for those things?
Go ahead, Clinton.
I'm fine with this not being here because I got emails about all of these when there was time for these to happen. And so I'm just okay with it. I think it's great to have it in terms of, I think it's great information to have. But all of these are, almost every tour that we have, every event we go to, we get a notification about it. We get an email about it. I was getting them when I was new. Wasn't tracking all of them, but I'm tracking a lot of them now. But I don't know if it needs to be in the policies and procedures manual. So, but
You
that's
raise your
just my
hand
thought.
first.
Thank you. I will agree with Councilmember Taylor on this as well. When we first were onboarded, we were notified almost immediately on tours that we needed to have and accomplish by the directors. So we heard from Chief, we heard from Ingrid, we heard from everybody for those tours, and they were immediately put on our calendars. So I don't think this is necessary at all.
Go ahead.
I appreciate the feedback of both council members Taylors. Coming in the time of COVID, coming in with a smaller cohort of new council members, I had a number of things that were, to your point, just directly added to my schedule. But part of where this came from is feedback I had heard from Councilmember Rakes when she came on in that midstream cycle of not being in kind of a standard cohort with other people, is that, there are certain things that I think even now you're just having that first opportunity to do as it's coming up again. And the invitations coming, for some of these tours, because they hadn't been available during COVID, are only coming to me now. And so it's in that space of being in maybe kind of an irregular cycle, for coming into council, that I see perhaps more of a need than you guys may have because of the timing and the circumstance in which you came into council. So it's not to say that staff don't very much actively work towards getting us to the places that we need to be. It's more that I think in the documentation, it's just helpful to know that these are things that are available to us as council members. So again, and this one in particular, it's just language saying these are recommended. If we wanted to strike within the first year and just say, you know, these are available or tweak that language, I'm flexible with that. I do think it's helpful to have though. I don't know, Cheryl, what's your input being in kind of that different, sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm echoing, you're echoing what I just said. When I first came in, we got these as they set them up for us. And I didn't know of all these until it was put into my calendar after I was in. And they set up the tours. And that's when I found out what they were. Each director did every so many months would send us an email saying that it's time for, do you want to go on a tour? So they took us to our tours and stuff, but it would have been nice to know ahead of time what tours there were available for us beforehand.
For me, because I echo Clinton Taylor that we should not have it here because first it's attached to staff, not us, but we know it's there. Maybe we just add it in the top where we have the City Hall, we have City of Auburn facility tours, so we already have it in 6.3.3. So kind of we just repeat things. If you look here, I thought we have City of Auburn facility tours. So maybe we add and we remove White River Valley Museum and we just add it as being recommended from directors or staff. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think moving forward, I think this is now when staff, and I'm maybe speaking out of turn here, but I feel like staff has realized when they onboarded 4 new council members, this is gonna be standard operating procedure moving forward, or at least that's the impression I understand. So that may be what happens moving forward, I don't know. But I feel like they've learned, they're riding the ship, so to speak, and then making sure that everybody is trained up and familiar with the necessary facilities, tours, and whatnot now.
Go ahead.
I'll agree that it was a problem coming in midstream, but I have talked to staff about that. I think Hanan's right in the fact that it's mentioned up there in 6 point,
If you go up.
City Hall.
Number 3.
Yeah,
and
City of Auburn facility tours, and I don't think we have to list them all separately, because they're doing a really good job now about getting the tours done. As long as the tours are listed, you know, that's what I think.
So the consensus that I've heard from 4 of the 6 of you is that City of Auburn facility tours covers this section here. And so what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is remove City Hall from here and do not add this section. Is that what I'm understanding?
Sure.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the one piece that is not above, if you wanted to standardize with the facility tours, are the partner facilities as well as the police ride along as being different sort of types of activities. And then this was also the section where we were talking about adding, because it's more of a recommendation versus a must do, is where I would have put the municipal leadership certificate. So just calling out, how do you want to handle that if we make these changes?
Go ahead, Mayor.
So maybe to make sure that that's all in there, under 6.3.3, where you have City of Auburn facility tours, make that City of Auburn and associate facility tours. Associated maybe is a better word.
I think we should remove White River Museum because technically it should be already visited.
Sure.
Go ahead.
That one I have in specifically as part of what would have been required training, in part because all of City of Auburn's new hires go through that training currently, and it has been part of the practices supported by the Ready Coalition. So on that particular bullet, the goal was to make sure that that found a home within what would be expected for standard training for council, because that's also what we expect of new hires.
Question, that's the mayor. Do they still have that training or no?
The White River Valley Museum is still applicable for new hires. Yes.
Because, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Why you're in the back again?
I'm here. No, I want to answer Councilmember Baldwin's question about the municipal thing. When I originally brought it up, I had brought it up for deputy mayors should have those because it's kind of more of an advanced thing. So I don't know if we just want to put it in that chapter and not require, but anybody could do it at any time. But when I had originally brought it up, it was just for the deputy mayor chapter.
Go ahead.
I would be happy to have it as recommended here and perhaps even required for deputy mayor, because I think that that has great content that we would want whoever's stepping into that role to have. So I could see it in different presentations within this section as well as within the deputy mayor section when we get to it.
I have a comment. If you go up here, we wrote that required training shall be completed by 2.2. Because are we saying all these trainings should be done within 6 months? And we want to do the municipal certificate?
That's a lot.
That's,
This, Chair?
Well, you can.
go ahead.
This is why I had them separated, so you could have the track for things we would consider standard and required, and be able to set a guidance for what you wanted that time frame to be for all of those activities, as well as things that were simply recommended within whatever time
Thank
frame
you.
we would want there. Your decisions to collapse them have adjusted what those targets would potentially be. So if we want to consolidate everything into just training and standard, that does leave kind of a weird question mark over things that would be in that recommended space, such as the advanced leadership certificates or other types of activities. So if that changes the timeframes, I'm happy to hear what we think those should be.
Go ahead. I saw your hand this
I
time.
still stand at just putting the advanced, the municipal things in the deputy mayor's thing, because it is a lot of training right away. And even when you do the advanced municipal and some of the classes you have to take, your brain's pretty overloaded. And so that's my recommendation, not to put it here in the deputy mayor.
So council, since we have, my understanding, so first consensus, we're going to remove this section, oopsies.
Correct.
I have consensus to remove this section. Okay. With that, there was talk of changing the 6 months. Is there consensus to leave the 6 month or change it?
I don't even know if we should have a month in there, or just put that it needs to get done, because some of those, like the elected official workshops, some of those don't happen right away.
Yeah.
See
Well,
what
the
I'm
elected
saying?
officials workshop, I'm sorry, those are scheduled
Oh,
to
yeah,
coincide with
that's
the
true.
election season.
Okay,
Your
what about-
first time didn't coincide with that because you came in outside of
It
the
was-
regular cycle.
Okay.
I would be comfortable to see within the first year. That gives plenty of opportunity and time to get most of the recommended training done.
Because if you think of it, almost October, and we have not finished the whole tours for us as first. So, yeah, I think first 12 months, first year will be more.
So 6 to 12 months?
Just within first 12 is
No, I
probably
mean 12 months, I'm saying change 6 to 12
Yeah,
months.
to 12 months, yeah.
Year, month.
years. probably.
Okay, so are we comfortable with the changes to section 6.3.2 with section 6.3.3
Mhm.
and section 3.3.1?
Mhm.
So those are the changes for section, that portion. Let me jump back to this one. You have the,
Hold on,
I'm sorry,
go
ma'am.
ahead.
So in this version that's being updated, council training is 6.4, but in this, it's 6.3. So are you moving 6.3 to 6.4, or is this just the numbering that's incorrect?
The number is inconsistent, so,
So it should be 6.4 in
It
all
will
of
be.
these cases.
and so this will be removed. And the new portion will be updated. So don't worry about the numbering because it will.
Okay.
And so 6.5 has just some grammatical changes. 6.6, we have the code of conduct that has been added. Do I have consensus on
Oh.
6?
I don't know. It's right in front of me.
I'm sorry, what was
No, I
that?
was looking, it's right in front of me.
Oh. I can jump to 20.1 real quick so everybody can see what that looks like. I could, except I didn't apparently put it in here. Sorry, Council.
Oh, it's okay. I'm happy it's you who do that.
These are the proposed, or these are the change, that's why it's not in there, because it's not a change. This is what 20.1 currently says. Okay, I can go back to proposed changes. Sorry for the random scrolling. Are we comfortable with the changes to section 6.6? Do I have consensus? I only see. So I do have 4 heads, so I'm going to move on to. Let me just look real quick. Section 12 is the deputy mayor section. That's the next section that we have with some suggested edits. The only changes that came to me from council outside of what is in the ad hoc committee's suggestion are here on the screen. So these are different obviously different council members, they're just compiled onto one document. Okay. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the additional recommendations?
Go ahead, Mayor.
Just so you know, it's not always possible to get your CML and your advanced CML within the first year.
Right.
So you're limiting the number of individuals who could serve as deputy mayor by assuming that the CML and the advanced CML are going to have them prepared for the role.
So, can you speak? Usually they will have the election at the end of the year. That means technically the person will be in office the whole years. That's how it has been. So this is number one. Yeah. So go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, I actually had a question for how the first edit in 2.1 would work, because in this section, we talk about the ability in sort of multiple places. We've got 12.1E that speaks to the deputy mayor serving at the pleasure of council. We've got 12.1, I believe it's H, and different places where our rules of procedure would indicate that elections could potentially take place at any time of year if the body decides that it wants to change the deputy mayor. And so I think my concern with the addition in 12.1 of the elections will be held no later than the last council meeting of the year for determining the deputy mayor for the subsequent year is I don't think that those two things work together, like functionally from a legal standpoint. Because if you're saying that we could have that election at any point, is that then indicating that whoever that inbound deputy mayor isn't taking office until the next year? Do you see what I'm saying? So I feel like it's sort of functionally broken in how it's worded. From a,
Did you raise your hand? Go ahead, Mayor.
Well, I'm just trying to understand, because in 12.1 are annually or more often as deemed appropriate. And then elections will be held no later than the last council meeting of the year for determining the deputy mayor for the subsequent year. You have to have one in place for the beginning of that next year. And then if there is an issue, there can be another vote later in the year to change out through the end of that current year. But then you would also need to then determine who the deputy mayor is for the subsequent year. So I don't think, from my reading of 12.1 with that addition, that it's in conflict. I think it just says that by the end of each year, you need to vote for a deputy mayor for the beginning of the next year.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if maybe it would function better if that piece for the elections will be held no later became maybe a sub-bullet, because I think by having it with 12.1 as sort of the parent, I think that may be part of the mechanics of working our way through it. Because in reading it as part of the main header, it feels like it applies to any election of the deputy mayor as opposed to just maybe the final end of year one. And so I wouldn't want to be in a position where we're electing a different person in March, but for some reason this would show up as applying to that individual to not take that seat until the next January. Does that make sense? It's probably logical minutia, but just thinking that that would do better as a sub-bullet instead of sitting with the parent for 12.1. Is anyone else following this?
You lost all of us.
I'll be honest.
Go ahead.
If I'm hearing you correctly, is like, okay, you're fine with the election for the subsequent year, but case in point, for instance, somebody falls ill and we have to have another election like in March. Is that where I'm
Yeah, like if something happened and we needed to have the election, by having that second paragraph in the main header, it feels like that would be applicable to any given election as opposed to sort of that final one that takes place. So I'm trying to keep us from getting in a position where we would bring somebody in earlier within a year and in that statement be indicating that they're not taking that position until the subsequent year, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying it may be better brought down as opposed to being up in the header.
So
Go ahead,
Sorry.
Tracy.
if I'm understanding correctly, then, for instance, oh wait, hold on. I lost my train of thought. Hold on. I'm thinking about this too hard. It shouldn't be that difficult. So,
She wanted to be like A rather than B. And I think my understanding you wanted 12.1A. It's not as the header.
We could add the word routine.
Okay.
Routine elections.
Okay.
Uh,
I was looking to our attorney like,
You can write whatever y'all want.
let's put ourselves in a legal loophole. Yeah, either that or I would just move it to be the last letter under 12.1, maybe like a G or whatever. So, because that's sort of the thing, is you get to the end of the year, if you've not elected, have your election and go.
Do I have consensus to move this section or leave it as is? Do I have consensus? Sorry, 12.1. We're still on the determining the deputy mayor for the subsequent year.
Okay.
Do we want to add any language there? Do we want?
Last council meeting.
Yeah, I would add routine and then just move it to the last letter of 12.1. Because it's a bit of a catch, right? Saying if we didn't get to it in the course of the year, hey, we gotta get it knocked out. And then,
So, do I have consensus to move this whole section that's highlighted here? Or leave it as is?
I think we need to keep it as, why you wanna remove it?
Not remove, move.
Oh, move, okay, move it to be to 12 point, yes, okay. Because we need to have a date when we have the election. That's how hysterical it was, yeah.
Do I have consensus to move this to item 12.1
I,
I?
yes.
Thank you for the emphasis.
I'm fine with it.
We have an I, okay, it's still there, I, D, G.
So I hear two on minds with it, yes, okay.
Excuse me.
Still 12.
I'll fix it. Okay. Okay. Don't worry about the numbering there. So, section.
12.2. 12.1A?
Yeah, but it
12.1A.
changed my letters.
Oh.
There we go.
It's fine.
So 12.1A, any member of the city council, and then removing this verbiage. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Hold on. Okay, go ahead.
I think we should leave the 1 year in there. We've all just been talking about how much they have to do within the first year.
I agree.
So I can't imagine anybody taking deputy mayor that first year. So I think we should leave the first year in there. And I'm okay with, as far as the municipal thing, maybe we could just put recommend that they do it while they're deputy mayor. I'm
was
done.
Oh, you're done. I know she's done it, so. Go ahead.
I'm just thinking back to situations that have occurred while I was on council. And we had at least one, if not two, council members who served terms that were not consecutive. And so you may have someone coming back that has served on the council before, and in their second tour, may have many years of experience, who you might want to have as deputy mayor, but the way that this is written now, it would be based on their current term and they're in their first year, so you want to designate something separate that would eliminate someone with experience from having that role.
For me, okay, go. If you think of it and I was watching all the historical, technically, anyone, even if we appoint someone, they'll be start January, so they'll be eligible by December, it will be almost. So I think we should, that's the way, that's why we remove it. Because technically, even if we appoint someone, and if we get someone like, let's say was expert, and we appoint someone from former council, so kind of will have. That's why it be removed, but go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, I think the mayor has a great point with making sure that we don't exclude people who do have that experience of previously serving on council. So I would want to make sure that what it seems like we're trying to do within this section is identify what do we think the threshold is for confidence in whoever's going to serve in that position of deputy mayor. And I think the reason we have the point of having a year of experience or having municipal certificates or having it have been, for interim, the most senior member of council is that there's recognition that as anybody is onboarded into these positions, that there is a bit of a fire hose of information that you're taking in and learning to be in a position not only to serve the city, but to serve your fellow council members. And so I think that we need to have something that gives us some framework to say, these are the folks who'd be eligible to step into that role and be nominated for it. I don't know what the right language is for that. So I'm curious what my counterparts say would be a good and holistic way to do that, to make sure that we're gonna have confidence in those folks coming in, right? So they have a little bit of that experience, a little bit of that balance, and the opportunity to, be up to speed with all of the goings-on of the city. So I think that's what we're trying to achieve, and I'm just curious the best way to frame that for us within this document.
Could it say something like any member of the city council with at least 1 year of council experience?
Go ahead.
But then are you adding like their first year? Because I was told that I couldn't run for deputy mayor because it ended in December.
I was watching before and they thought they included and mayor, I think that happened 2014 or 16, something about it. They said from the year, it's not like 1 year, like from the January to December, you'd be eligible. It's not like whole years, that's my understanding. Go ahead, Mayor.
The way it's been for a while is that by the time you take the position of deputy mayor, you will have served for 1 year.
Yeah, so.
But to be fair, let's just use Councilmember Rakes in that example. Councilmember Rakes did not start in January, she started in February. So at the end of that year for deputy mayor, Councilmember Rakes would not, under the current rules, have been eligible to serve as the deputy mayor.
Go ahead.
And I'm okay with that. I mean, me personally, I'm okay with it. We say it's a year, then if you came on in March or February and your February was your year, then when the next round comes around, you can throw your hat in there and say, I want to be deputy mayor. So when the next one comes up in December, you can put your hat in the ring and apply for that. I'm okay with that.
Go ahead.
Thanks. So I think it's helpful to have the year of experience, and I think it can be a rolling year for whenever anybody would come in, because we can have elections at any point in the year, right? So I think we have a habit of looking at, a December election or late November election, but in reality, we can have one at any time. So I think having it be a rolling year, not necessarily specific to the current term or a certain term, opens that up a little bit more. And then I do want us to make sure that we clarify 1 year of experience to serve or 1 year of experience to be nominated, because those are two different things depending on when that position would begin. So I just want to make sure that we figure out the answer to that question. And also time check, because I think we said we would do 60 minutes on this today. Go ahead.
I just know that I heard from several directors that were puzzled when we went to the 1 year, especially when the person has just came in and was in 1 year and then they became deputy mayor. It was a learning curve for them also to start educating this new council member of everything that they were trying to get done. So I'm okay with the 1 year, but I know that those trainings are very important to be able to get into this position.
Mayor.
So the way that's written right now is saying that you have to have been in office for a year by the time you're nominated, not for the time when you would begin serving. That completely changes who is eligible for deputy mayor.
That's exactly why I was asking for clarity around that. When we look at this, do we want it to be 1 year of experience before nomination or 1 year of experience before serving? Because at the end of the day, whatever we set up for this needs to best serve the community, as opposed to even our own interests. So what do we think as a body is going to be best for council's work on behalf of our residents in this space?
So what I'm hearing the consensus is that any council member that has started in January, the following January, you want them to be able to be the deputy mayor, if nominated and chosen, right? So Councilmember Clinton Taylor started in January. If in December he was nominated in December, he would be able to serve the following January. That's not what it says.
That's not the way it's written.
But that is what, is that the consensus of what I?
Yes.
So if we took out this word, nominate it and say
Renominate.
serve,
Okay.
would that not?
I think taking out,
Go ahead, Mayor.
I think if you just unstrike who will have served on the council for 1 year at the beginning of that council member's term as deputy mayor,
Just leave,
leave it in as it was, gets you to the ability to serve at the beginning of your second year on council. Right? So instead of adding that with at least 1 year of council experience, any member of the city council who will have served on the council for 1 year at the beginning of that council member's term as deputy mayor may be nominated for the position of deputy mayor.
I like it.
so leave it alone.
Yeah,
Leave it alone? Okay.
no,
Thank
what the
you.
mayor said.
So, well, that is leaving it alone.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Mayor, thank you.
So we have gotten through section 12.A. Is there any concerns or thoughts about section 2 here? Okay.
We're doing what, 12.A.2?
12.A.2, yep. Okay, I have consensus for that. There is obviously a lot left to go through.
Okay.
It is not my place to
No, I'm
say anything
fine, I'm
else.
looking. Yes.
When we had last worked on this, we said we would do about an hour in the session, and then if we needed more time, we would do
That's
more.
what we were saying, okay, and I was looking to her to look to the schedule.
Oh, we already scheduled it
Yeah,
for the
Yeah,
30th.
that's why I said okay. Yeah,
I didn't
I'm
understand.
turning it back to
Thank
you.
you, because I was gonna say, I need to be, I'm getting nauseous. I'm not feeling too well, so I will, if there's no further questions, if there's no further, there's nothing else on the agenda until September 30th, meeting's adjourned.